Picture this: you're standing on the shore of a vast, dark ocean centuries ago. The only sounds are the crash of waves and the creak of an old wooden ship. In that immense and unknown expanse, sailors returned with stories not of fish or whales as we know them, but of living mountains in the sea, of serpentine necks that rose like towers from the abyss, of tentacles that could drag a vessel to the depths in a heartbeat. These weren't just tales, they were reported, recorded, and sometimes drawn on the edges of ancient maps with the chilling warning, "Here be monsters." For thousands of years, human imagination has been captivated and sometimes terrified by the idea of giant sea creatures. These legends are woven into the very fabric of our history, appearing in everything from Babylonian creation myths to the detailed bestiaries of the Middle Ages. They speak to a deep primal curiosity and fear of what lies beneath the waves, in the parts of our world that remain more alien to us than the surface of the moon. This video is an expedition into that very mystery. We're going to navigate through time, sifting through 50 historical accounts of these colossal beings of the deep. This isn't just about folklore or myth, it's about the persistent global testimony from cultures that had no contact with one another, all describing similar, impossible beasts. What's truly remarkable is how these reports were often treated with utmost seriousness. Medieval scholars included them in encyclopedias of natural history. Ship captains logged them in official records. Cartographers marked their supposed territories on navigational charts meant for practical use. This wasn't fantasy for them, it was a potential reality, a genuine danger or wonder that existed just beyond the horizon. These stories form a hidden history of our relationship with the ocean, a chronicle written not just in ink and parchment, but in the awe and trepidation of every mariner who dared to sail into the unknown. So why have these accounts persisted for so long? What is it about the idea of a leviathan that continues to grip us? Perhaps it's because the ocean itself is the last great frontier on Earth, a place of profound darkness and mystery. Even today, with all our technology, we've explored only a fraction of the deep sea. These historical mentions are a bridge to that enduring mystery. They remind us that our world is still full of wonders we have yet to fully understand. As we embark on this journey together, from ancient maps to medieval bestiaries and sailors' logs, we'll uncover the evidence, examine the contexts, and ask the tantalizing question: were our ancestors simply telling tall tales, or were they documenting something real, something that might still be waiting in the deep? Get ready to dive into one of history's most fascinating and enduring puzzles. Our journey begins not at sea, but in the desert, with one of the oldest civilizations known to history. The ancient Mesopotamians, living between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, looked upon the vast, unpredictable waters that surrounded their world and saw not emptiness, but a living, breathing, and often terrifying divinity. The very first giant sea creature in recorded history is perhaps the grandest of them all, the Babylonian goddess Tiamat. She was not a mere monster, she was the primordial embodiment of the saltwater ocean, a dragon of chaos from whose body the world itself was forged. In the great creation epic, the Enuma Elish, Tiamat is described as a colossal, serpentine being who takes the form of a massive sea dragon, rising up against the younger gods. She doesn't just command the sea, she is the sea, a personification of the formless, dangerous abyss that existed before order. Her defeat by the storm god Marduk is a foundational myth. He splits her body in two, using one half to form the heavens and the other to form the earth. So, in a very literal sense for the Babylonians, the entire cosmos was built upon the carcass of the first and greatest sea monster. This isn't a simple sailor's yarn. It's a cosmological statement where the Leviathan is the raw material of creation itself. While Tiamat represented the immense cosmic scale of the sea, other Mesopotamian beings filled its depths with more tangible, yet equally formidable creatures. From Assyrian mythology comes the colossal, which translates roughly to fishman. These weren't the solitary beasts we often picture, but rather a race of hybrid beings depicted in art as having the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish, often with a scaly hide. They served as attendants to the great gods, particularly the god of wisdom and fresh water, acting as ministers and guardians of the deep. The colossal represents a different kind of marine giant, not a mindless force of destruction, but an intelligent, organized being that inhabited the same waters as the deities. They were part of the divine bureaucracy of the ocean, suggesting that the ancients saw the sea as a populated kingdom, with its own hierarchy and inhabitants who could interact with and even serve the powers of the world above. To complete this early triad, we must dive even deeper into the Sumerian concept of the Abzu. Also known as Apsu, this was not a creature per se, but the name for the vast subterranean ocean of fresh water that the Sumerians believed lay beneath the earth, feeding the rivers and wells. It was the cosmic freshwater aquifer, the source of all life, but the Abzu was far from a peaceful place. It was conceived of as a realm, an abyss inhabited by its own host of monstrous beings who served its master, the god Enki. These creatures were the strange and often terrifying denizens of this sunless world, entities that embodied the mysterious and sometimes hostile nature of the deep, life-giving waters. So we have Tiamat as the chaotic saltwater sea, the colossal as its intelligent inhabitants, and the Abzu as the mysterious, monster-filled freshwater abyss. Together, they form a complete and sophisticated ancient world, where the waters of the world were alive, divine, and densely populated with beings of immense power and scale, setting a template for sea monster legends that would echo for thousands of years. From the primordial waters of Mesopotamia, our exploration now sails to the banks of the Nile, where the daily cycle of the sun was a cosmic battle against a serpentine giant of the deep. In ancient Egypt, the ultimate embodiment of chaos and evil was not a mere monster but a cosmic force named Apep, or Apophis. This was no animal one might encounter. It was a colossal serpent, so immense it was said to be leagues long, dwelling in the eternal darkness of the underworld sea. Every single night, as the sun god Ra traveled through this perilous realm in his solar bark, Apep would rise from the depths to attack. Its goal was nothing less than the annihilation of order, light, and life itself, seeking to devour Ra and plunge the world into permanent chaos. The Egyptians believed this battle was real and ongoing, with priests performing rituals to help the gods subdue Apep, cutting its likeness with knives and spitting on it to ensure the sun would victorious and rise again each morning. Apep represents the sea monster as a direct antagonist to the divine order, a perpetual threat that must be defeated daily for the world to continue existing. Meanwhile, along the coastline of the ancient Levant, another fearsome serpent was coiled in the mythology of the Canaanites. This was the Leviathan, a name that would echo powerfully through history. In the Ugaritic text, Leviathan is described as a fleeting serpent and a twisting serpent, a powerful, multi-headed sea dragon that battled the storm god Baal. The defeat of Leviathan was a central act of creation, as Baal established his kingship by conquering the chaos of the sea. This Leviathan was more than a simple beast. It was a symbol of the untamable, primordial ocean, a force that had to be subdued for civilization and cosmic order to be possible. Its role was profoundly theological, representing the constant struggle between the creative, life-giving forces of the gods and the destructive, formless chaos of the watery abyss. This powerful Canaanite concept was then absorbed and transformed within the Hebrew Bible, where the Leviathan takes on an even more complex and awe-inspiring character. In the book of Job, God himself uses the Leviathan as the ultimate example of a creature beyond human comprehension or control. The description is terrifyingly vivid. Its back is made of rows of shields, sealed together so tightly that no air can come between them. Its sneezes flash with light, and its eyes are like the rays of the dawn. Fire and smoke pour from its mouth, and it leaves a shining wake in the water as it moves. This is not a creature that can be tamed or hunted by any man. God's rhetorical question to Job underscores its divine and untouchable nature. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook or tie down its tongue with a rope? The answer is a resounding no. Here, the sea monster is no longer a defeated foe of a god, but a magnificent, untamable marvel of God's own creation, a symbol of the wild, untamed parts of the world that serve to humble human ambition and highlight the immense gap between mortal and divine power. And in that very same passage from Job, we are introduced to Leviathan's terrestrial counterpart, a creature of equally staggering scale, the behemoth. While often depicted in later tradition as a land animal like an elephant or, most commonly, a sort of super hippopotamus, the text itself imbues the behemoth with a near-cosmic significance. It is called the first of the ways of God, a primal chief creation. Its bones are like tubes of bronze, its limbs like bars of iron. It is described as being unbothered by a raging river, so mighty and confident that the Jordan River surging against its mouth causes it no alarm. While it dwells in marshes and rivers, its sheer size and power connect it to the same theme as Leviathan. These are beings that operate on a different scale entirely, living monuments to the raw, creative power of the divine. Together, the Egyptian Apep, the Canaanite Leviathan, and the biblical behemoth form a powerful triad of ancient thought. They show us that across these cultures, giant creatures were not just super-sized fauna. They were essential theological symbols representing the chaos that threatens order, the untamable wild that exists alongside civilization, and the majestic, humbling power of the divine that humanity can witness but never fully master. While the ancient world saw sea monsters as divine symbols of chaos, the classical era brought them crashing onto the shores of human affairs, becoming direct antagonists in the foundational stories of heroes and explorers. In Greek mythology, few creatures are as visually dramatic as the Cetus, a beast whose name became synonymous with a monstrous whale or sea serpent. Its most famous appearance is in the legend of Perseus and Andromeda. The story goes that Queen Cassiopeia boasted that her daughter, Andromeda, was more beautiful than the Nereids, the sea nymphs. Enraged, the sea god Poseidon sent a terrible Cetus to ravage the coast of their kingdom, Ethiopia. The only way to appease the monster was to chain the innocent Andromeda to a rock by the sea as a sacrifice. Ancient artists depicted the Cetus as a truly terrifying hybrid, often with the gaping jaws of a shark, the bulky body of a whale, and sometimes even the forefeet of a land animal, a nightmarish fusion of every conceivable marine threat. When the hero Perseus flies past on his winged sandals, he sees the princess in peril and the monster rising from the depths. Using the severed head of Medusa, he turns the colossal beast to stone, saving Andromeda. The Cetus represents a very tangible, localized sea monster, a divine punishment made flesh that interacts directly with humanity, establishing a template for the heroic sea monster slaying narrative that would resonate for centuries. Far to the north, in the cold, treacherous waters of the North Atlantic, Norse sailors told tales of a creature that was less a singular monster and more a mobile, predatory part of the seascape itself, the Kraken. First detailed in Icelandic sagas and later by writers like the 13th century author of The King's Mirror, the Kraken was described as the world's largest sea monster, a colossal cephalopod so vast that it was often mistaken for a chain of islands. According to these accounts, this beast would lie dormant and floating on the surface, its back forming a seemingly hospitable shore. The terrifying trick was that when unsuspecting sailors landed on this false island to make camp and light their fires, the heat would stir the monster. It would suddenly plunge into the depths, creating a whirlpool that would drag the entire ship and its crew down to a watery grave. Other descriptions highlighted its immense tree-like arms that could rise from the sea and encircle a vessel, pulling it under in an instant. For the Vikings and the Norse explorers who navigated some of the most dangerous seas on Earth, the Kraken was a personification of the ocean's most unpredictable and lethal hazards, sudden storms, rogue waves, and the unseen dangers of the deep. It was a practical warning born from a culture of exploration, a way to explain the unexplainable forces that could swallow a longship without a trace. Returning to the Mediterranean, but to a much more intimate and claustrophobic kind of terror, we encounter Scylla from Homer's epic poem, the Odyssey. As the hero Odysseus attempts to guide his ship through the narrow Strait of Messina, he is faced with an impossible choice. On one side lies the whirlpool Charybdis, which swallows and spits out the sea 3 times a day. On the other side is the cliff face housing Scylla. Homer describes her not as a single beast, but as a horrifying composite creature. She has 12 flailing feet and 6 long, serpentine necks, each one topped with a grisly head featuring a triple row of fangs. From her cave, she lunges out, snatching 6 of Odysseus's strongest men from the deck of his ship, screaming as they are lifted into the air and devoured. Unlike the singular Cetus or the vast Kraken, Scylla represents a very specific tactical danger of seafaring, the peril of navigating tight channels and treacherous coastlines. She is the monster of the narrow passage, the localized predator that makes certain routes a calculated and often tragic risk. Her presence in one of the most foundational works of Western literature cemented the idea of the sea as a place not just of broad, chaotic threats, but of personalized, inescapable horrors that could strike even the most cunning of heroes. Together, these 3 classical monsters, the Cetus, the Kraken, and Scylla, show a fascinating evolution. They move from being instruments of divine wrath in a myth to environmental hazards in the sagas of explorers, and finally to personified perils in epic poetry, reflecting the diverse ways ancient seafaring cultures mapped their very real fears onto the mysterious and unforgiving canvas of the ocean. Leaving behind the singular terrors of the ocean, we now dive into the complex and fascinating world of Greek mythology's collective marine giants, where creatures weren't just solitary monsters but often represented entire species or divine races inhabiting the waters. First, we must confront the Hydra of Lerna, a beast that was technically slain in a swamp, but whose legend is so deeply tied to water and regeneration that it demands a place in this chronicle. Described by poets like Hesiod, the Hydra was no ordinary serpent. It was the offspring of the monstrous Typhon and Echidna, and it served as the guardian of an entrance to the underworld in the swamps of Lerna. Its most infamous feature was its multiple heads. The number varies in different accounts, but it was often said to have 8, 9, or even 50. And if that wasn't challenging enough, for every head that was cut off, 2 more would grow back in its place. To make matters worse, its very breath was toxic, and one of its heads was immortal. This was the creature faced by Heracles as his second labor. The hero's eventual victory by cauterizing the neck stumps to prevent regeneration and burying the immortal head under a massive rock shows a shift in how these monsters were overcome. It wasn't just brute strength, it was ingenuity and persistence against a foe that embodied the very concept of an unstoppable, multiplying threat, a nightmare of the fecund and diseased marshland. While the Hydra represented a chaotic force to be destroyed, other Greek marine beings played more benevolent, though still powerful, roles. The Tritons, for instance, were not a single entity but an entire race of sea deities. Often depicted as mermen, they had the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish. The most famous among them was Triton, the son of Poseidon and Amphitrite, who acted as his father's herald and trumpeter. He was often shown wielding a conch shell, which he would blow to calm or raise the waves at the command of the sea god. But beyond this chief Triton, ancient art and literature is filled with a host of other Tritons, sometimes called the Trions, who formed part of the procession of Poseidon's court. They were the escorts and attendants for the Nereids and other sea divinities, often depicted riding alongside dolphins or seahorses. They represent the personification of the ocean's sounds and waves, the friendly, or at least neutral faces of the sea who could guide sailors or deliver messages from the depths, showing that the Greeks saw the marine world as a structured society, not just a home for monsters. This idea of a structured, divine marine society is taken a step further with the ichthyocentaurs, or fish centaurs, some of the most imaginative hybrid creatures of all. As their name suggests, they combined elements of humans, horses, and fish. Typically, an ichthyocentaur was depicted with the upper body of a human, the lower front quarters of a horse, and the tail of a fish, replacing the hind legs of a traditional centaur. The most well-known of these were Bythos and Aphras, whose names literally mean sea depths and sea foam, respectively. According to some traditions, they were the foster parents of the goddess Aphrodite after she was born from the sea foam, raising her in the depths. They were considered wise and gentle beings associated with the bounty and mystery of the ocean. The ichthyocentaur embodies a complete fusion of land and sea, a being that is equally at home in the water as its land-based counterpart is on the earth, suggesting a continuity between all realms of the world. Together, the Hydra, the Tritons, and the ichthyocentaurs present a remarkable spectrum. From the monstrous, chaotic guardian of a deathly swamp to the orderly heralds of the sea god's will, and finally to the nurturing, wise teachers of a goddess, these beings show that the ancient Greek conception of the ocean was richly layered, populated by a full ecosystem of creatures that reflected every aspect of the marine environment, from its terrifying dangers to its profound life-giving mysteries. As we move from the mythological monsters of the Greeks to the world of the Roman Empire, we encounter a fascinating shift, a move toward documentation, and a stated pursuit of factual natural history, even when the creatures described were anything but ordinary. The towering figure in this arena is Pliny the Elder, a Roman author and naval commander whose massive work, Naturalis Historia, attempted to catalogue all known knowledge of the natural world. Within its volumes, we find accounts of sea creatures that straddle the line between observed reality and incredible legend. Pliny describes encounters with enormous sea serpents, beasts so vast that they could encircle and constrict entire ships. In one particularly gripping account, he tells of a Roman fleet commander off the coast of North Africa who was forced to engage a serpent of colossal proportions, a creature that rose from the water to challenge the vessels, its size and power requiring the full might of military ballistae and catapults to repel. What makes Pliny so compelling is his tone. He presents these accounts not as folklore but as verified facts collected from the reports of sailors and military expeditions. He was compiling what he believed to be a scientific encyclopedia, and the inclusion of these giant serpents reveals a world where the oceans were still largely unknown and capable of producing creatures that defied everyday comprehension. His work became an authoritative text for over 1,000 years, cementing the idea of these immense marine serpents in the European imagination and passing the torch of mystery from the age of myth to the age of supposed empiricism. Centuries later, in the meticulously illuminated pages of medieval bestiaries, the sea serpent evolved once more, taking on a more structured and didactic form. These were not dry scientific texts, but moralizing books of beasts where every creature, real or imagined, was meant to teach a Christian lesson. It is here we meet the Lacerta marina, or the sea lizard. This creature was often depicted as a massive, reptilian beast with a dragon-like head, a long, serrated back, and powerful flippers. Unlike the more serpentine forms described by Pliny, the Lacerta marina had a distinct, almost crocodilian body, a fusion of known terrestrial predators and the unknown horrors of the deep. The bestiaries would describe its nature and habits, but the primary purpose was allegorical. The sea lizard, like all monsters, was presented as a symbol of the devil or the dangers of sin, a lurking threat to the soul of the faithful sailor or the unwary Christian. This representational shift is crucial. The monster was no longer just a physical danger to be recorded by naturalists, but a spiritual one to be understood and avoided through faith. These illustrated manuscripts, copied and recopied in monastic scriptoria, ensured that the concept of a giant, predatory marine reptile remained a vivid and morally charged part of the medieval worldview, blending classical reports with a new, powerful layer of theological meaning. This tradition of blending keen observation with outright fantasy reaches a spectacular crescendo in the 16th century with the work of a Swedish cartographer and writer named Olaus Magnus. His masterpiece, the Carta Marina, is one of the most detailed and imaginative maps of northern Europe ever created, and its surrounding waters are a teeming menagerie of maritime nightmares. While he includes serpents of phenomenal length coiling around ships, it is his depictions of whales that are truly fanciful and terrifying. Olaus describes and illustrates whales with physical features that seem borrowed from the landscape itself. Some are shown with rough, rocky skin, covered in what appears to be sand and vegetation, explicitly described as being mistaken for islands by sailors. He tells of crews landing on these living islands to light cooking fires, only for the enraged whale to feel the heat and plunge into the depths, dragging the entire ship down in the ensuing whirlpool. Other whales in his work are shown with faces almost like monstrous dogs, or with huge, forward-facing tusks, and some are depicted in the act of attacking vessels, using their snouts to smash hulls or their spouts to flood decks. What makes Olaus Magnus so significant is that he was operating at the very dawn of the modern age, yet his work is a grand synthesis of all that came before. The classical reports of Pliny, the moral allegories of the bestiaries, and the genuine, if misunderstood, sailor lore of the North Sea. His whales are not just animals, they are active, intelligent, and malevolent forces of nature, personifying the very real and deadly perils of Atlantic and Arctic navigation. His map and his accompanying book, History of the Northern Peoples, became incredibly influential across Europe, proving that even in the age of exploration, the sea remained a place where the line between the observed world and the world of monsters was beautifully and terrifyingly blurred. As our historical voyage continues, we now chart a course eastward to lands where the sea and the very structure of the cosmos were intertwined, revealing visions of marine giants that dwarf even the grandest creatures of European lore. From the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula emerges one of the most staggering concepts in all of world mythology, the cosmic whale known as Bahamut. In Arabic cosmography, particularly detailed in texts like Zakaria al-Qazwini's The Wonders of Creation, the world does not simply float in space. It is supported on the back of an unimaginably vast whale, a creature so immense that all the seas of the earth are but a drop in its bucket. The layers of this cosmic stack are designed to humble human perception. Bahamut itself swims through a boundless sea, and upon its back stands a colossal bull named Kayatha. Resting on the bull's head is a mighty plateau of ruby, and upon this plateau stands an angel, and upon the shoulders of this angel rests the entire known world of mountains, oceans, and continents. The purpose of Bahamut is not malevolence but sheer, incomprehensible scale. It serves as a direct metaphor for the infinite power and majesty of the divine, a reminder that the foundations of reality itself are built upon wonders far beyond human understanding. To even contemplate Bahamut is to acknowledge that our entire planet is just a single passenger on a journey through a celestial ocean. Journeying next to the heart of the ancient Persian Empire, we find a different kind of maritime encounter, one that blends royal authority with the mysteries of the deep. In the legendary tales of the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, the great Shah Jamshid is a figure of immense power and wisdom, a ruler who commands not just men but the very elements and creatures of the world. In his epic narratives, he is said to have embarked upon sea voyages where he confronted and subdued monstrous beings that threatened his fleet. These were not singular, named beasts like a kraken or a cetus, but a host of formidable creatures, often described as giant serpents or dragon-like beings that rose from the waves. For a king like Jamshid, overcoming these sea monsters was not merely a feat of survival. It was a demonstration of his divine right to rule, a testament to his ability to impose order upon chaos, even in the most lawless and untamable domain, the open ocean. These stories served a profound political and cultural purpose, reinforcing the idea that the ideal Persian monarch was a figure of such power that even the denizens of the deep would acknowledge his sovereignty. The monsters of Jamshid's seas were personifications of the chaotic forces that any ruler must conquer to establish and maintain a just and orderly civilization. Crossing the vast continent to ancient China, we encounter a creature that embodies the very essence of aquatic power and spiritual authority, the Jiaolong. This being is often translated as a flood dragon or a scaly dragon, and it holds a unique and commanding position in Chinese folklore and mythology. Unlike the cosmic Bahamut or the conquered beasts of Jamshid, the Jiaolong is an integral part of the natural and spiritual world, a creature in a constant state of becoming. It is said to begin its life as a mundane water-dwelling creature, often a giant fish, a large serpent, or even a water snake. Through a process of cultivation, often over centuries, and by surviving dramatic natural trials like leaping up a mighty waterfall during a seasonal flood, it can transform into a true dragon, the Jiaolong. This metamorphosis made it a powerful symbol of perseverance, potential, and ascension. The Jiaolong was believed to be the master of rivers, lakes, and coastal waters, governing the rains, floods, and the flow of all freshwater. It was both revered and feared. While it could bring the life-giving rains necessary for agriculture, it could also summon devastating floods if disrespected. Temples were built along riverbanks to honor these dragons, and sacrifices were offered to appease them, illustrating a deeply rooted cultural relationship where humanity existed in a careful, negotiated balance with the intelligent, powerful creatures believed to rule the waters. From the cosmic pillar of Bahamut to the royal challenges of Shah Jamshid, and finally to the transformative river masters of China, these accounts reveal a fascinating global tapestry where giant sea creatures were not merely monsters, but essential components of cosmology, kingship, and the delicate spiritual equilibrium between humanity and the natural world. From the sprawling cosmic visions of the East, we now enter the realm of local legends where the ocean's terrors become intensely personal, shaped by the unique coastlines and cultures they inhabit. Along the treacherous coasts of Japan, where sudden squalls and rogue waves could spell instant doom for fishermen, there arose the legend of the Yumabazu. This is not a creature of flesh and blood, but a malevolent, ghostly sea spirit, often appearing as a massive, dark, humanoid figure with a large, bald, monk-like head rising from a turbulent sea. The name itself means sea monk, a chilling mockery of the peaceful Buddhist clergy. Encounters with the Yumabazu were said to occur on unnervingly calm days. The sea would turn glassy, and this monstrous form would surface beside a vessel, sometimes demanding a barrel from the terrified crew. If provided, it would use the barrel to fill the boat with seawater, sinking it and drowning everyone aboard. Other tales describe it simply capsizing boats with its immense hands or asking impossible riddles. The Yumabazu is a pure embodiment of the sea's unpredictable and cruel nature, a personification of the sudden, inexplicable disaster that could strike even the most experienced sailors, reflecting a deep-seated cultural respect for and fear of the ocean's capricious power. Far to the north, in the icy domains of Norse mythology, we encounter a sea serpent of literally world-ending proportions, Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. Born of the trickster god Loki and the giantess Angabotha, This beast was so fearsome that the All-Father Odin cast it into the great ocean that encircles the human world, Midgard. There, the serpent grew so immense that it eventually encircled the entire earth, grasping its own tail in its mouth, forming an unbreakable loop around the lands of mortals. Jörmungandr is not a local menace but a cosmic one, a fundamental pillar of the Norse worldview. Its presence in the ocean defines the boundary between the ordered world and the chaotic outer realms. Its eternal enemy is the thunder god Thor, and their legendary encounters are a central theme in the myths. In one famous story, Thor goes fishing with the giant Hymir, using the head of an ox as bait, and succeeds in hooking the serpent, nearly pulling it from the water before Hymir cuts the line in terror. This cataclysmic struggle is a prelude to their final confrontation at Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, where it is prophesied that Thor will slay the serpent, but will then take only 9 steps before falling dead from its venom. Jörmungandr represents the sea as an apocalyptic force, a sleeping giant whose inevitable awakening will bring about the end of the current world order. In the coastal waters of Cornwall, in the rugged southwest of England, a more recent but no less persistent sea monster has captured the local imagination, the Morgauer. Its name literally means sea giant in the Cornish language, and sightings have been reported for over a century, with a notable surge in the 1970s. Descriptions paint a bizarre and unsettling picture: a creature with a humped back, a long, flexible neck, and stumpy horns or bristles along its spine, often compared to a prehistoric plesiosaur or a kind of enormous serpentine seal. What makes the Morgauer particularly fascinating is its modern context. In 1976, 2 separate photographs were published in a local newspaper, the Falmouth Packet, allegedly showing the creature in Falmouth Bay. Though often debated and considered likely hoaxes, these images fueled public interest and cemented the Morgauer in contemporary folklore. Locals and visitors continue to report strange sightings, often describing it as shy and elusive, quickly diving below the waves when spotted. The Morgauer represents the enduring nature of sea monster legends even in the modern era. It is a cryptid, a creature whose existence is suggested by anecdotal evidence but not confirmed by science, proving that the human desire to believe there are still unknown giants in the deep remains as strong as ever in an age of satellites and sonar. Together, these 3 creatures, the ghostly Yumabazu, the apocalyptic Jörmungandr, and the cryptic Morgauer, showcase the remarkable range of maritime folklore. They illustrate how cultures project their greatest fears onto the canvas of the ocean, from the immediate personal terror of a sudden shipwreck to the grand mythological fear of the world's end, and finally to the hopeful, modern fascination with the idea that mysteries still linger just off our well-charted shores. Each legend is a product of its environment, a story told to explain the unknown and to give a face to the profound and often frightening power of the sea. Among the most formidable and persistent legends from the Viking sagas are the accounts of the Hafgufa and the sea orm, creatures that were less fantastical beasts and more accepted realities of the northern seas. Norse explorers venturing into the icy waters of the North Atlantic and beyond logged these encounters with a matter-of-fact tone that underscores their belief in these beings. The Hafgufa, often described as a colossal sea monster of indeterminate shape, was said to employ a unique and terrifying hunting strategy. It would belch forth a pungent, irresistible scent that drew schools of fish directly into its waiting, cavernous mouth. Some scholars suggest the Hafgufa may have been inspired by observations of the filter-feeding behaviors of enormous baleen whales, their gaping maws misinterpreted by awestruck sailors as a form of monstrous deception. Alongside it, the Viking sea orm was a more classic serpentine terror, a creature of immense length and power, capable of coiling around a longship and dragging it beneath the waves. These orms were not mere background folklore. They were navigational hazards noted in the same breath as rogue waves and jagged icebergs, representing the very real and ever-present danger of the unknown that these intrepid explorers faced every time they sailed beyond the horizon. This theme of the sea itself being deceptive and alive finds a powerful expression in the early medieval Christian legend of Saint Brendan the Navigator. In the fantastical Voyage of Saint Brendan, a Latin text from around the 8th century, the Irish monk and his brethren embark on a perilous journey across the Atlantic in a simple currach, seeking the promised land of the saints. During their epic voyage, they miraculously land on a small, barren island to celebrate Easter Mass. After they build a fire on the shore, the island suddenly shudders and begins to move, revealing itself not as land but as a colossal living creature. The text identifies the beast as Jasconius, a whale of such unimaginable scale that its back was covered in sand and vegetation, perfectly mimicking a true island. The monks flee in terror back to their boat as the whale dives, leaving them to ponder the divine lesson in the illusion. This story, repeated and embellished for centuries, served as a profound allegory about the nature of faith and the deceptive appearances of the world, while also reflecting a universal sailor's anxiety that the very ground you trust beneath your feet on the open ocean could prove to be a fatal mirage. Venturing from the cold northern seas to the vast, steamy river systems of the Congo Basin in Central Africa, we encounter a legend of a very different kind of aquatic giant, the Mokele Mbembe. While often categorized as a dinosaur-like creature said to dwell in the remote swamps and jungles, its lore is deeply intertwined with water. Described by various indigenous accounts over the past century as a beast the size of an elephant, with a long neck, a small head, and a heavy, sauropod-like body, the Mokele Mbembe is consistently reported as an herbivore that spends most of its time submerged in deep river channels, only emerging to feed on certain foliage. It is said to be fiercely territorial, attacking canoes that venture too close to its domain. What makes this legend so compelling in the context of global sea monster narratives is its connection to a different kind of exploration narrative, not of transoceanic voyages, but of the penetration of Earth's last unexplored terrestrial frontiers. For Western explorers and cryptozoologists of the 20th century, the Mokele Mbembe became a symbol of the possibility that a relic population of prehistoric creatures could have survived undetected in the planet's most impenetrable jungles, a living fossil from an age of giants. It represents the enduring human hope that some pockets of the world remain wild enough to hide creatures we believed extinct, transforming the African river systems into a kind of inland sea, holding its own unique and mysterious leviathan. While the Norse saga spoke of sea monsters as navigational realities, back in the scriptoria and universities of medieval Europe, scholars were creating a beautifully organized and spiritually charged catalogue of these very same terrors. The medieval bestiary was not merely a book of animals, it was a moral and theological encyclopedia where every creature, real or imagined, served as a divine allegory. Within these illuminated pages, the ocean was populated by a host of fantastical beings whose primary purpose was to instruct the Christian soul. We encounter the whale not as a simple marine mammal, but as a cunning demon. The bestiary allegory describes how this beast, with its rough, sandy back, would float on the surface, appearing as a peaceful island to lure weary sailors ashore. Once the men lit their cooking fires on its hide, the pain would drive the whale to dive, drowning the deceived sailors. This was a direct lesson on the dangers of Satan, who deceives the faithful with false comforts and leads them to spiritual ruin. Similarly, the sawfish, with its long, toothed snout, was depicted as a creature that could saw through the hulls of ships, representing the insidious, cutting power of sin that could breach a person's spiritual defenses. These bestiaries took the raw, terrifying reports from sailors and transformed them into a coherent symbolic language, mapping the geography of the soul onto the unknown geography of the sea. This symbolic mapping of the world reached its grandest, most spectacular form in the great medieval Mappae Mundi, the world maps that were less about accurate geography and more about illustrating a Christian cosmic history. The most famous of these, the magnificent Hereford Mappa Mundi, created around the year 1300, presents a circular world with Jerusalem at its center and a teeming, perilous ocean encircling the known land. And in that outer ring, along the edges of human knowledge, swim the sea serpents. They are drawn with sinuous, coiling bodies, often with fierce, dragon-like heads, weaving between the illustrations of ships and distant islands. Their placement is profoundly significant. They do not inhabit the familiar waters of the Mediterranean or the English Channel. They are banished to the absolute margins, the literal edge of the world. On the Hereford map, these serpents are not just animals. They are visual representations of chaos, evil, and the unknown that surrounds the ordered Christian cosmos. They mark the boundary between the world sanctified by God's story and the formless, monstrous void that lies beyond. For a medieval viewer, this map was a spiritual guide, and the sea serpents were a stark reminder that venturing too far from the heart of Christendom, whether in body or in spirit, meant entering a realm of physical and spiritual danger. But not all medieval sea monsters were allegorical symbols. Some were born from a desperate attempt to explain very real and very terrifying encounters. From the cold northern seas comes the legend of the Ziphius, a creature whose name means sword-like and whose description chilled the blood of sailors for centuries. Often described as a monstrous whale or a gigantic owl-like beast of the ocean, the Ziphius was said to possess a fearsome, sword-like beak or snout that it would use to viciously attack and tear apart the wooden hulls of ships. Its back was described as being covered in sharp, cutting fins, and its eyes burned with a malevolent light. This creature was no mere symbol of sin. It was a reported predator, an active hunter of men. Historical accounts, like those recorded by the 16th century naturalist Conrad Gessner, described the Ziphius as a very real and present danger in the North Sea and the Baltic. Scholars now believe that the legend of the Ziphius likely originated from genuine and undoubtedly terrifying observations of the Cuvier's beaked whale, or perhaps the orca, a powerful toothed whale known for its coordinated hunting and formidable jaws. For medieval sailors, an encounter with a pod of aggressive orcas or the strange, deep-diving beaked whale could easily be interpreted as an attack by a single, demonic entity hell-bent on their destruction. The Ziphius represents the point where folklore, genuine marine biology, and sheer human terror collided, creating a creature so vivid and fearsome that it shaped the perceptions of an entire continent, warning generations of sailors that the ocean held not just spiritual metaphors, but tangible, razor-sharp horrors waiting just beneath the waves. Turning our gaze to the misty lochs and stormy coasts of Scotland, we find a creature whose appetite was as vast as the Highlands themselves, the siren croin. In Scottish Gaelic lore, this was not merely a large serpent. It was pronounced the largest animal in all the sea, a leviathan of such staggering proportions that it was said to be capable of swallowing 7 whales in a single monstrous gulp. This hyperbolic description wasn't meant to be taken as literal fact, but rather as a powerful poetic device to communicate an unimaginable scale. The siren croin was the apex predator of the Celtic imagination, a being that made even the great whales seem like mere minnows. It typically haunted the coastal waters and deep sea inlets, a lurking terror for fishermen and sailors. The legend served as a stark warning about the absolute top of the marine food chain, a creature so far beyond human comprehension that its very existence defined the ultimate danger of the open ocean. It encapsulated the profound respect and fear that these seafaring communities held for the unpredictable and often brutal North Atlantic waters that sustained and threatened their lives. Yet, for all the colossal terror of the siren croin, the Scottish Highlands held an even more intimate and personal horror in its freshwater lochs, the Each Uisg. Pronounced Ech Ushkia, this waterhorse was a shape-shifting predator of unparalleled cunning and malevolence. far more dangerous than its Irish cousin, the kelpie, which was often associated with rivers. The each-uist was a master of deception that dwelled in the deep, cold lochs. It most commonly appeared on the shore as a stunningly beautiful and seemingly tame horse, complete with a sleek saddle and bridle, tempting a weary traveler to mount it. However, once a victim was on its back, the creature's skin would become magically adhesive, fusing the rider to the beast. It would then gallop at an impossible speed directly into the loch, dragging the helpless person to a gruesome end. But its most chilling trait was its preferred method of consumption. It would devour every part of its prey except for the liver, which would be left floating on the surface as a grim testament to its feast. This specific detail transformed the each-uist from a simple monster of folklore into a deeply psychological terror, a creature that not only killed but left behind a visceral, horrifying calling card for the community to find. The terrifying genius of the each-uist, however, lay in its ability to shed its equine form entirely. It was said to sometimes transform into a handsome, charming man in order to court and seduce young women. In this human guise, it would be the perfect suitor, but it could always be identified by the telltale water weeds or sand trapped in its hair. If its intended victim discovered its true nature or tried to escape, the illusion would shatter, and the each-uist would revert to its true form, seizing the person and pulling them back into the watery depths. This shape-shifting ability made the each-uist a profoundly personal threat. It wasn't a distant sea serpent you might encounter on a voyage. It was a danger that could walk into your village, charm its way into your home, and exploit trust and affection to claim its victim. It represented the treacherous nature of the landscape itself, where a beautiful loch on a calm day could hide a bottomless, murderous secret, and where trust placed in a stranger could lead to a watery grave. While Scottish lore thrived on chilling allegory, the 18th century brought a powerful voice that claimed to treat sea serpents as a matter of straightforward science and eyewitness testimony. Eric Pontoppidan, the Bishop of Bergen in Norway, published his The Natural History of Norway in 1752, and it became a sensation across Europe. Pontoppidan set out to document the genuine wonders of his northern seas, and he devoted significant space to the reality of the Norwegian sea serpent. He described it not as a mythical beast, but as a genuine animal, reporting that it was often seen coiled high above the water, with a body as thick as a barrel and a mane of hair running down its long neck. He collected sworn accounts from fishermen and sailors, men he considered credible and God-fearing, who reported creatures of unbelievable length, some stretching longer than the mainmast of a large ship. One of the most compelling accounts he recorded came from Captain Lawrence von Ferry, who provided a detailed report and even an illustration of an encounter in 1746. Von Ferry described a serpent-like head rising several feet out of the water, dark in color, and estimated the visible part of the creature to be at least as long as his entire vessel. Pontoppidan's work was revolutionary because he presented these creatures within the framework of natural history, not fantasy. He argued that if the giant kraken, which he also detailed, was accepted as real, then why not a giant serpent? He meticulously Chinese letter common skeptical explanations, suggesting that what others might dismiss as a line of porpoises, a gathering of seals, or simply floating seaweed, were in fact misidentifications of a true, yet to be classified marine giant. His authoritative tone and his position as a bishop lent his writings a significant air of credibility, convincing many readers that the oceans truly were home to these spectacular, undocumented animals. Pontoppidan's serpent became the archetypal sea serpent of the modern era, a long-necked, humped creature that would form the basis for countless reported sightings for the next 2 centuries. He effectively bridged the gap between ancient legend and the emerging age of Enlightenment science, arguing that the greatest wonders of God's creation were still waiting to be formally discovered by man, hiding in the vast, unexplored darkness of the deep. Yet, even as scholars debated, the oceans continued to produce shocking encounters that could not be easily dismissed. In the summer of 1817, the bustling port of Gloucester, Massachusetts, became the epicenter of a marine mystery that would capture the attention of the entire nation. It began in August when numerous credible witnesses, including ship captains, fishermen, and even a local magistrate, reported a creature of astounding dimensions in Gloucester Harbor and the surrounding waters. The descriptions were remarkably consistent: a dark-bodied serpent, often compared to a row of buoys or casks strung together, estimated to be between 50 and 100 feet in length. It was said to move with a vertical undulation, its head, which resembled that of a turtle or a snake, held several feet above the surface. The sightings were so frequent and the witnesses so reputable that the Linnean Society of New England launched a formal investigation, collecting sworn affidavits and even publishing a report that attempted to classify the creature as a new species, which they rather boldly named Scoliophis atlanticus. This was a pivotal moment. For the first time in America, a sea serpent was being treated not as folklore, but as a zoological puzzle to be solved by scientific inquiry. The sheer volume of testimony from level-headed New England mariners gave the Gloucester serpent a credibility that earlier legends lacked, forcing naturalists to grapple with the possibility that a large, unknown animal truly did inhabit the Atlantic. 3 decades later and an ocean away, a sighting occurred that carried the weight of the entire British Empire. In August 1848, the Royal Navy vessel HMS Daedalus, commanded by Captain Peter Emquihey, was on a return voyage from the Cape of Good Hope to Plymouth when, off the western coast of Africa, the officer of the watch and several crew members witnessed something extraordinary. A massive sea serpent, estimated to be at least 60 feet long, passed within 200 yards of the ship, holding a steady course for nearly 20 minutes. Captain Emquihey, a seasoned and respected naval officer, submitted a detailed report to the Admiralty, which was subsequently published in the Times of London, causing a public sensation. He described an animal with a head and neck held about 4 feet out of the water, a diameter similar to that of a man's torso, and a distinct dark brown mane running along its back. It propelled itself without any visible fins, and he was adamant that it was not a known creature like a giant squid or a whale. The Admiralty, seeking to quell the excitement, suggested the officers had simply seen a large seal or a floating seaweed mat. But Captain he staunchly defended his account, insisting that he and his men had observed a genuine, unidentified marine animal of immense size. The Daedalus encounter was so compelling precisely because of its source. This was not a tale from a superstitious fisherman, but a sworn statement from a captain of the world's most powerful navy, lending an air of unimpeachable authority to the sea serpent phenomenon and challenging the scientific establishment to provide a better explanation. As the world entered the 20th century, with steamships replacing sail and science seeming to explain away the last mysteries, one final classic encounter would demonstrate that the age of sea serpents was not yet over. In November 1903, the British steamship SS Tresco was navigating the channel between the Scilly Isles and Land's End when the captain, James R. J. L. Foster, and his entire crew witnessed a creature that defied all conventional classification. Captain Foster's log entry, later reported in newspapers, described a beast with a long, serpentine neck and a head like a turtle, moving rapidly through the water and leaving a substantial wake. The creature was observed for several minutes at close range before it submerged. This account is particularly significant because it came from a modern steamship captain, a man familiar with the latest maritime technology and presumably less prone to superstitious fancy. The SS Tresco sighting, following the established patterns of Gloucester and the Daedalus, presented a frustratingly consistent profile, a long-necked, fast-moving animal that did not match any known species. Scientific skepticism, of course, remained the dominant response. For every credible sighting, naturalists offered alternative explanations. A string of leaping porpoises seen from a distance, a rarely encountered oarfish, a basking shark with its decomposing carcass stretched into a serpentine form, or even a misidentified giant squid. Yet, the cumulative weight of these well-documented reports from trained observers created a persistent anomaly in the zoological record. They formed a pattern of testimony spanning centuries and continents, a chorus of witnesses from different eras and cultures, all describing a similar, elusive giant of the deep, suggesting that while the explanations might be debated, the profound and unsettling experiences of those who saw them were very, very real. While the scientific establishment of the 18th century was growing increasingly skeptical, a different kind of authority, that of a pious and respected missionary, provided one of the most detailed and influential sea serpent accounts of the era. In 1734, the Norwegian missionary Hans Egede, known as the Apostle of Greenland, was sailing along the western coast of the newly colonized land when his ship encountered something that defied belief. Egede, a man not given to fancy, meticulously recorded the event in his journal. He described a terrifying sea monster that raised itself so high out of the water its head reached above the ship's maintop. Its body was long and powerful, much thicker than the ship itself, and its skin appeared wrinkled and rugged. The head was narrow and pointed, and it used its long, broad flippers to propel itself through the waves. What makes Egede's account so compelling is his character. He was a sober, devout man whose life's work was grounded in practical hardship and spiritual conviction, not tall tales. His description, accompanied by an illustration published later, became a cornerstone of sea serpent lore, cited for centuries as evidence from a wholly reliable and unimpeachable witness. Egede's monster stands as a powerful testament from the age of exploration, a moment where the documented world of faith and science collided with an undeniable and terrifying mystery from the deep. Far to the east, in the cold, rugged landscape of Iceland, a freshwater lake holds a legend of a creature that has evolved from medieval folklore into a modern-day cryptid. This is the Lagarfelljótsörmurinn, or the worm of Lake Lagarfelljót. The legend begins centuries ago with a simple, almost fairy tale premise. A young girl, seeking to increase her wealth, placed a gold ring on a living heathworm, a small, serpent-like creature. But instead of the worm growing to guard the treasure, it grew uncontrollably, becoming so large the girl had to throw it into the lake. There, the worm continued to grow, transforming into a monstrous serpent that now haunts the 13-mile-long lake. Historical annals, such as the 17th century Annals of Björn of Skardsar, record its appearances, often seen coiled up on the shore or swimming with a distinctive humped silhouette. For the local Icelanders, the worm was a real and potent part of their environment, a being whose movements were even said to predict the quality of the coming hay harvest. Unlike ocean-going serpents, the Lagarfelljótsörmurinn is a deeply localized phenomenon, a creature bound to a specific, known body of water, making its persistent sightings over hundreds of years all the more intriguing and difficult to dismiss as simple misidentifications of floating logs or otters. Crossing the Atlantic to the modern era, we find that the tradition of localized lake monsters is alive and well, even in the densely populated United States. Since the 1940s, and with a major surge in the 1980s, hundreds of people have reported sightings of a creature nicknamed Chessie in the Chesapeake Bay. Descriptions are remarkably consistent: a dark-colored serpentine animal, typically 25 to 40 feet long, with a body as wide as a football and several humps visible above the waterline. It is often described as moving with a vertical, undulating motion, much like the classic sea serpents of old. What sets Chessie apart is its modern context. In 1982, a couple even managed to capture several minutes of home video footage showing a long, dark, sinuous object moving through the water, which was later analyzed by marine biologists at the Smithsonian. While the footage was inconclusive, it sparked serious interest. The Chesapeake Bay is a massive, complex estuary with deep, murky channels, and scientists have proposed that witnesses might be seeing an unusually large and wayward manatee, a line of otters, or even a known but rare fish like the Atlantic sturgeon, which can grow over 15 feet long and has a prehistoric, armored appearance. Yet, the sheer volume of eyewitness reports from credible observers, including police officers, pilots, and fishermen over decades, suggests that something unusual continues to capture the public's imagination in these waters. When we place these three accounts side by side, the historical report of Hans Egede, the centuries-old folklore of the Icelandic worm, and the modern American sightings of Chessie, a fascinating pattern emerges across time and culture. Egede's description from the open ocean and the accounts of Chessie in a coastal bay share surprising similarities. A long, serpentine body, a distinct head held above water, and a humped or undulating motion. The Lagarfjöldsormurinn, while confined to a lake, fits the same general profile. This consistency is the central puzzle of the sea serpent phenomenon. Are we seeing a continuous thread of misidentification where floating debris, known marine animals in unusual formations, or even weather phenomena are interpreted through a pre-existing cultural lens of monster stories? Or does this persistent global testimony point to the possibility that a large marine animal, perhaps a species of long-necked seal or a zeuglodont whale thought to be extinct, has managed to evade definitive scientific classification? The accounts from a Greenland missionary, Icelandic farmers, and Maryland residents, separated by centuries and continents, all speak to a deep-seated human need to explain the unexplained, to give a name and a shape to the shadows that move in the deepest, darkest waters we have yet to fully explore. But our journey is far from over, for these legends are not confined to the saltwater abyss. They have also found a home in the deep, cold freshwater lakes of northern Europe, where isolated bodies of water cradle their own unique and persistent monsters. In the tranquil waters of Norway's Lake Seljord, a legend has swum for centuries, known affectionately as Selma. Unlike the terrifying sea serpents of the open ocean, Selma is often described in a more benign, almost gentle light. Witnesses over the years have reported a creature with a long, serpentine body, often showing several humps above the surface and a horse-like or reptilian head. The first documented sighting dates all the way back to 1750 and was recorded in a local church record, giving it an official weight that simple folklore often lacks. Since then, there have been hundreds of accounts, including a notable surge in the 1970s that caught international attention. What makes Selma particularly fascinating is the community's embrace of its local monster. The town of Seljord has incorporated the creature into its identity, featuring it on the municipal coat of arms and even hosting an annual expedition to search for it. This friendly relationship stands in stark contrast to the terror often associated with such beasts, suggesting that a lake monster can become a cherished part of local heritage, a symbol of the unique mystery that defines a place and its people. Just across the border in Sweden, the deep and ancient Lake Storsjön holds a rival for the title of Scandinavia's most famous lake monster, the Storsjöodjuret, or the Great Lake Monster. Its history is remarkably deep, with roots reaching into Norse mythology. Legend says the creature was conjured in the 18th century by two trolls, Jota and Kotta, who used a magical potion to create a guardian for their treasure hidden in the lake. The first written account, however, appears in a diary from 1839, and sightings have been reported consistently ever since. Descriptions are classic for a lake cryptid: a long, serpentine body with multiple humps, a dog-like or reptilian head on a long neck, and dark gray or black skin. The Storsjöodjuret has been taken so seriously that in the late 19th century, the local county administrative board actually placed the monster under official protection, a status that remained in effect for over a century. This official sanction is unparalleled in the world of cryptozoology, transforming the creature from a mere folktale into a legally recognized, if elusive, part of the local fauna. Expeditions using sonar and submarines have been launched to find it, and while they have recorded large, unidentifiable objects moving in the deep waters, no definitive proof has emerged. The Storsarojoret embodies the enduring power of these legends to capture not just the imagination of individuals, but the official interest of an entire community, blurring the line between myth and potential reality in a way that is uniquely compelling. Of course, no discussion of freshwater lake monsters would be complete without turning our attention to the most famous of them all, but we must travel back in time to an era before the modern legend was born. While the world knows the name Nessie from the famous photograph of 1934, the stories of a creature in Scotland's Loch Ness are centuries older. The very first written account comes from the life of Saint Columba in the 6th century, recorded by his biographer Adamnan around the year 690. The story tells how the Irish saint encountered local Picts burying a man who had been mauled by a water beast in the River Ness. Later, Columba saw the creature itself, and by making the sign of the cross and commanding it to leave, he drove the monster back into the depths, saving one of his own followers from attack. This early account establishes the creature not as a solitary animal, but as a malevolent force that could be countered by divine power. Centuries later, in the 1800s, reports continued to surface. An 18th century document mentions large fish of strange form in the loch, and an 1880 article in the Inverness Courier describes a sighting by a diver who claimed to have seen a very odd-looking beastie resembling a giant frog, far from the plesiosaur or image we know today. These pre-1900 accounts are crucial because they prove that the idea of a large, unknown creature in Loch Ness existed long before the road was built along its shore in the 1930s, an event that many skeptics argue led to the modern wave of sightings. The ancient lore of St. Columba and the scattered reports of the Victorian era show that the seed of the legend was planted deep in the local soil, waiting only for the right moment to bloom into a global phenomenon. Together, Selma, the Storsarojoret, and the early precursors of the Loch Ness monster reveal a powerful pattern. They show that the human need to populate deep, dark waters with giants is not limited to the boundless ocean. These inland seas, often lying in remote and majestic landscapes, become perfect containers for mystery, their isolated and uncharted depths serving as a blank canvas upon which generations can project their wonder, their fear, and their unwavering belief that the world still holds magnificent secrets close to home. Crossing into the Pacific Northwest, the cold, nutrient-rich waters of the Pacific Ocean near British Columbia have produced one of the most enduring and well-documented sea serpent legends of the modern era, the Cadborosaurus, affectionately known as Caddy. Described by witnesses for over a century, Caddy is typically reported as a long, serpentine creature, often estimated between 30 and 60 feet in length, with a series of humps and a distinctive head that is frequently compared to that of a camel, a horse, or even a giraffe. The name itself, a portmanteau of Cadboro Bay near Victoria, where many sightings have occurred, and Saurus, lends it an air of scientific inquiry. What sets Caddy apart from many other marine cryptids is the sheer volume of credible testimony. Reports come from fishermen, lighthouse keepers, law enforcement officers, and even a former British Columbia premier. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence emerged in 1937, when the carcass of a strange, serpent-like creature was discovered in the stomach of a sperm whale harpooned near the Queen Charlotte Islands. Nicknamed the Naddon Harbour carcass, the remains were photographed and samples were sent for analysis, but the specimen was later lost, leaving the photos as a tantalizing and unresolved piece of the puzzle. For the coastal communities of the Pacific Northwest, Caddy is not a monster of fear, but a fascinating anomaly, a potential relic species or an unknown form of life that symbolizes the enduring biological mystery of their own backyard waters. Venturing inland from the Pacific coast, we arrive at the deep, glacially carved Lake Okanagan in British Columbia's interior, home to one of North America's most famous lake monsters, the Ogopogo. Its history predates European settlement by centuries, rooted deeply in the lore of the local Syilx Okanagan people, who know the creature as Enha'ayik, meaning lake demon. In their traditions, this was a powerful, supernatural entity that inhabited the lake, particularly a cave near Squally Point, and demanded respect and offerings from anyone who wished to cross its waters. Indigenous people would traditionally bring small animals to sacrifice to Enha'ayik to ensure safe passage, a practice that underscores the creature's role as a revered and feared spirit of the lake. When European settlers arrived, they absorbed these local legends, and by the late 19th century, sightings began to be reported in newspapers, with the creature eventually receiving the playful, musical name Ogopogo in the 1920s. Modern descriptions are remarkably consistent: a dark green or black body as long as a telephone pole, with a series of humps and a head resembling that of a horse or a sheep. Over the decades, there have been hundreds of sightings, supported by numerous photographs and films, though none have provided definitive proof. The legend of the Ogopogo is so deeply woven into the cultural fabric of the region that it has been declared an official endangered species by the province and is a major tourist attraction, representing a perfect blend of ancient indigenous spiritual belief and contemporary cryptozoological curiosity. Further east, in the vast prairie landscape of Manitoba, lies Lake Manitoba, the home of a more elusive but persistently reported creature known as Manipogo. The name, a clear nod to its more famous cousin in British Columbia, reflects its place in the Canadian lake monster family. Sightings of Manipogo date back to the early 20th century, with a significant wave of reports occurring in the 1950s and 60s. Witnesses typically describe a dark brown or black serpentine animal, 20 to 50 feet long, with multiple humps and a sheep-like or snake-like head. One of the most compelling accounts comes from 1962, when two separate groups of witnesses on the same day reported seeing a large, humped creature in the lake. Like the Ogopogo, the legend of Manipogo also has indigenous roots. Local First Nations peoples have oral traditions of a great serpent or water spirit in the lake, a being that commanded respect. While it has not achieved the same level of fame or commercial recognition as the Ogopogo, the consistent testimony from fishermen, vacationers, and local residents over many decades suggests that Lake Manitoba, with its considerable size and depth, holds its own unique mystery. The stories of Caddy, the Ogopogo, and Manipogo form a powerful trifecta of Canadian aquatic mystery, demonstrating that from the open Pacific to the isolated prairie lakes, the human experience of encountering something large, unknown, and serpentine in the water is a recurring and deeply compelling theme, one that connects modern eyewitnesses to the ancient traditions of the first people. The land. Our journey now takes us to the windswept, dramatic landscapes of Patagonia, where the deep, glacial waters of Nahuelhuapi Lake are said to conceal a creature of ancient mystery, the Nahuelito. Sightings of this Argentine cousin to the Loch Ness monster date back over a century, with the first major wave of reports occurring in the early 1900s. Locals and tourists alike have described a large, dark, humped creature, sometimes with a swan-like neck, moving powerfully through the water and leaving a substantial wake. The legend truly captured the public imagination in 1922, when a prospector named Martin Sheffield claimed to have seen a huge, unknown animal in the lake, describing it as having a body like a drum and a long neck. His report was compelling enough that the director of the Buenos Aires Zoo, Clement Wunley, launched a formal expedition to find the beast, an effort that ended without conclusive proof but cemented Nahuelito in the national consciousness. What makes this legend so fascinating is its potential connection to the region's prehistoric past. Patagonia was once home to a diverse array of giant reptiles and mammals. Some researchers have suggested that if an unknown creature does inhabit the lake, it could be a relic population of a plesios, or much like the theories surrounding Nessie. Others point to a more grounded yet equally impressive possibility: a surviving notosuchian, a type of ancient aquatic crocodilian that once roamed the region. The lake itself, with its immense depth, hidden underwater caves, and connections to a complex network of glacial fjords, provides a plausible, isolated ecosystem where such a creature could theoretically persist unseen. Nahulito is more than just a monster story. It is a symbol of Patagonia's untamed wilderness, a reminder that even in the modern era, this remote and breathtaking corner of the world can still hold onto its deepest secrets. Venturing across the Pacific to the ancient continent of Australia, we encounter a creature of the skies and waterways that represents a different kind of relic, a memory of the megafauna that once dominated the land. From Aboriginal Australian lore comes the Miharung, a name derived from the Jab Wurrung word for giant emu. These were not mere mythical birds, they were described as enormous, flightless creatures, towering over the landscape with powerful legs and formidable beaks. The stories told by various Aboriginal nations, including the Gunditjmara and the Tiamat, are not vague legends but detailed accounts of hunting and interacting with these massive animals. The descriptions align almost perfectly with the fossil record of Genyornis newtoni, a real 500-kilogram, 2-meter-tall thunderbird that went extinct across Australia around 40,000 years ago. The oral traditions of the Aboriginal peoples have preserved the image of this incredible animal with stunning accuracy for countless generations, long before Western paleontologists ever unearthed its bones. This isn't just folklore, it is a living cultural fossil, a testament to the deep time knowledge held within indigenous cultures. The Miharung stories provide a powerful bridge between the world of myth and the world of science, demonstrating how ancient human experiences with the continent's unique and formidable wildlife were passed down, transforming real ecological history into a foundational part of cultural memory and spiritual understanding of the land. Perhaps the most complex and deeply rooted of all Australian water monsters is the bunyip, a creature whose very name strikes a chord of primal fear and mystery. The bunyip is not a single, easily defined beast. Its descriptions vary dramatically across the hundreds of Aboriginal language groups, reflecting the diverse ecosystems of the continent. In some traditions, it is a dog-faced creature with dark fur, a horse-like tail, and flippers. In others, it is more reptilian with scales, tusks, and a sinister, booming cry that echoes through the night from its home in billabongs, swamps, and riverbeds. For the Aboriginal peoples, the bunyip was a very real and dangerous spiritual entity, a guardian of the waterholes that would devour those who trespassed on its territory. Its cries were an omen of illness, death, or impending calamity. When European settlers arrived and began to hear these stories and strange noises for themselves, they too reported encounters, often trying to fit the bunyip into their own frame of reference, sometimes describing it as a runaway seal or an unknown marsupial. The fascinating scientific angle is that the bunyip, much like the Miharung, may also be a cultural memory of Australia's lost megafauna. The most compelling candidate is the Diprotodon, the largest marsupial to have ever lived, a rhinoceros-sized wombat that frequented water sources and went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. Alternatively, its descriptions could be an amalgamation of several extinct animals, or even a distorted memory of the now extinct Zygomaturus, a large hippopotamus-like marsupial. The bunyip's power lies in its ambiguity. It is the ultimate Australian cryptid, embodying the profound and often unsettling mystery of the continent's isolated, ancient landscape, a creature born from the deep time of the land itself and the enduring human need to give form to the unknown dangers that lurk in still, dark waters. From the mysterious depths of Canadian lakes and the ancient memories of Australia, we now set sail for the warm, turquoise waters of the Caribbean, where a different kind of terror awaits in the sun-drenched blue holes. The Bahamas are famous for their stunning underwater caverns, and local lore warns that these are the domain of the lusca, a monstrous creature that is far more than a simple giant octopus. Described as a terrifying hybrid, the lusca is said to have the head and body of a shark or a giant eel, but the powerful, grasping arms of a colossal octopus. It is a master of its environment, using the complex network of underwater caves and blue holes, deep, sudden sinkholes in the seafloor, as its lair. Fishermen tell tales of their entire catch being stolen in an instant, their lines pulled with unimaginable force from the abyss. The most chilling stories speak of the lusca's ability to create violent, unexpected whirlpools on a calm sea, sucking small boats and swimmers down into its subterranean kingdom, never to be seen again. This creature is not merely an animal, it is a personification of the very real and documented dangers of the blue holes themselves, their strong currents, sudden drop-offs, and labyrinthine tunnels that have claimed the lives of even experienced divers. The lusca serves as a powerful natural warning, a legendary explanation for the very tangible perils that lie hidden beneath the beautiful, deceptively calm surface of the Caribbean Sea. Leaving the tropical warmth for the frozen realms of the Arctic, we encounter a creature born from the stark necessities of survival in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. From Inuit legend comes the Tiamat, a swift and deadly serpentine monster that haunts the cracks in the sea ice and the narrow leads between flows. Described as a massive, snake-like being, often 7 to 15 feet long, with a large head and a long, whipping tail, the Tiamat is a master of ambush. It is said to lie in wait just below the water's surface, and with lightning speed, it will snatch people or even seals from the ice's edge, pulling them down into the frigid darkness before they can even cry out. Some accounts add even more terrifying features, like a flipper or a fin at the end of its body, or a head resembling that of a wolf or a seal. The Tiamat is not a creature of abstract myth. It is a direct reflection of the everyday dangers faced by Inuit hunters. The sound of cracking ice, the sudden splash in a lead, the disappearance of a prey animal, these are the real-world events that the Tiamat explains and embodies. It represents the constant, lurking threat of the icy water itself, a world where a single misstep can mean a swift and anonymous death. This legend served a crucial cultural purpose, instilling a necessary caution in those who depended on the sea ice for their livelihood, teaching respect for an environment that gives life but can take it away in an instant. Our final historical mention in this trio takes us away from open water and onto a European beach, where a bizarre discovery seemed to offer physical proof that the ocean's monsters were real. In the year 1546, on the coast of Denmark after a severe storm, a strange carcass washed ashore that would become known throughout the continent as the sea monk. Contemporary descriptions and woodcuts depict a creature with a human-like torso, a bald, monk-like head, and a tapering, fish-like tail where its legs should have been. Its arms were described as fin-like, and its skin was rough and scaly. The creature was immediately interpreted through a religious lens. Here was a denizen of the deep that mirrored the monastic orders on land, a shocking fusion of the human and the piscine. The discovery caused a sensation, seeming to validate the allegorical monsters of the bestiaries and suggesting that the ocean truly was a mirror world, populated by grotesque parallels to human society. For naturalists and theologians alike, it was a profound puzzle. Centuries later, modern science has offered plausible explanations for what the 16th century Danes actually found. The most widely accepted theory is that the sea monk was the heavily decomposed carcass of a large squid, perhaps a giant squid. The mantle of a large squid can easily be mistaken for a human-like torso, and its arm crown, when arranged in a certain way, could be interpreted as a friar's cowl or fin-like arms. Another strong candidate is an angel shark, a flat, ray-like fish whose broad shoulders and front-facing gills can create a startlingly humanoid silhouette when viewed from above, especially after decay has blurred its features. The sea monk stands as a perfect snapshot of a pivotal moment in history where the medieval worldview, steeped in religious symbolism, collided with a tangible piece of the natural world, demonstrating how the raw, unexplained evidence of the sea could be shaped by the powerful lens of human belief and fear. And so we reach the final two mentions on our list, and in a delicious twist of fate, we find that the grand finale of our historical chronicle brings us full circle, from pure legend back to the remarkable reality of the deep ocean itself. For centuries, sailors' reports of immense, silvery serpents seen undulating vertically near the surface were dismissed as the fantasies of sun-struck mariners. But what if these witnesses were actually describing one of the most breathtaking and elusive fish in the world? Enter the giant oarfish, a creature that seems to have swum straight out of a medieval bestiary and into our modern scientific record. This is a real animal, Regalecus glesni, and it holds the title of the longest bony fish in the world, with confirmed specimens stretching over 36 feet and anecdotal reports suggesting they can grow even longer. Its body is a stunning, ribbon-like silver band, studded with iridescent spots and topped with a magnificent crimson-red dorsal fin that runs the entire length of its back, starting with a cluster of long, ornate rays that form a brilliant crest above its head. When seen swimming near the surface, which is a rare event, as it typically lives in the profound darkness of the deep mesopelagic zone, its motion is utterly unique. It doesn't swim horizontally like an eel, but propels itself with a gentle, vertical undulation, its entire body moving in a graceful wave that perfectly matches the classic descriptions of a sea serpent holding its head high above the water. Imagine a weary sailor in the 1800s spotting this shimmering, impossible ribbon, dozens of feet long, moving with an alien elegance in the open ocean. Without any frame of reference, the only logical conclusion would be that he had just encountered a living, breathing sea serpent. The oarfish's rare appearances, often associated with storms or when they are injured and driven to the surface, cemented their legendary status. They were the real-life animals hiding in plain sight, the biological truth behind some of the most persistent and widespread sea monster reports in maritime history. Yet, while the giant oarfish may explain the long-necked serpentine variety of legend, the ocean held another genuine giant to account for the more monstrous, multi-armed terrors of sailors' yarns. For centuries, tales of the Kraken spoke of a beast with grasping, tree-thick arms that could rise from the depths to encircle and drag down a ship. These stories were long thought to be the stuff of pure fantasy, until the day science confirmed the existence of a creature that made the Kraken seem almost believable, the colossal squid Mesopotamian hamiltoni. This is not the more commonly known giant squid. The colossal squid is a heavier, more robust, and arguably more formidable predator from the freezing waters of the Antarctic. It is the largest known invertebrate on the planet, with estimates of its maximum size reaching a staggering 46 feet in length and weighing well over half a ton. Its arms and tentacles are not just long, they are equipped with savage, swiveling hooks, some as sharp as surgical blades and others shaped like cruel talons, designed to latch onto and shred the flesh of its prey, which includes large fish and even other deep-sea squids. For a sailing ship crew, the idea of such a creature, with its parrot-like beak capable of slicing through steel cable and its eyes the size of dinner plates to see in the eternal blackness, was the stuff of pure nightmare fuel. While a healthy colossal squid would never attack a surface vessel, the discovery of these true leviathans of the deep provided a tangible, biological anchor for the most terrifying Kraken stories. The washed-up remains of giant and colossal squids, with their monstrous, decomposing bodies and nightmarish beaks, were the physical evidence that proved the ocean was indeed capable of producing monsters that rivaled the wildest imaginations of storytellers. So, as we conclude our voyage through these 50 historical mentions, we are left with a profound and beautiful realization. The line between myth and reality in the world of giant sea creatures has always been wonderfully, tantalizingly blurred. The ancient mariners and cartographers were not merely inventing fictions, they were interpreting a world that was genuinely full of wonders beyond their comprehension. The giant oarfish was their sea serpent, the colossal squid was their kraken. The rare, bizarre encounters with beaked whales, basking sharks, and other deep-sea oddities provided the raw, physical evidence upon which centuries of lore were built. These stories were a pre-scientific attempt to categorize and understand a natural world that was far more bizarre and magnificent than they ever could have dreamed. They looked out upon the vast, empty expanse of the map, and they filled it with monsters not out of ignorance, but out of a primal, human instinct to explain the unknown. And in a stunning validation of that instinct, we now know that their maps were not entirely wrong. The ocean does hold giants, it does contain serpents and monsters. They simply bear scientific names and inhabit a world of crushing pressure and eternal night. A world we are only just beginning to explore. The legends, in the end, were a prophecy, waiting for our technology and our curiosity to finally catch up and reveal the incredible, living truths that were there all along, swimming just beneath the surface of our understanding. But to truly understand the profound terror and power of Tiamat, we must venture beyond the cosmic creation story and into the visceral details of her appearance and her monstrous offspring. In the Enuma Elish, she is not merely a passive sea, she is a wrathful, active combatant who creates an army of horrors to wage war against the younger gods. To aid her in this battle, she gives birth to 11 species of monsters, a terrifying bestiary that includes the Lamu, the hairy one, the Yugalu, the great storm demon, and the Kusaraku, the bull man. She appoints Kingu, her new consort, as the general of this monstrous legion and gives him the Tablet of Destinies, which holds the power to control the cosmos. This act transforms Tiamat from a symbolic representation of chaos into the literal mother of monsters, a generative, terrifying source of all that is twisted, violent, and antithetical to order. Her body is not just water, it is a factory for nightmares, and her very act of procreation is an act of war against the emerging structure of the universe. This dual role as both the primeval matter of creation and the source of its most destructive forces reveals a sophisticated ancient understanding of the natural world. The same ocean that gives life through its waters and bounty can also take it away through storms, floods, and the unseen terrors of its depths. Tiamat embodies this fundamental duality, a necessary but fearsome power that must be confronted and subdued for civilization to exist. This ancient narrative has proven incredibly resilient, finding powerful new life in the modern world, particularly within the realm of fantasy. Perhaps her most famous contemporary incarnation is in the world of Dungeons and Dragons, where Tiamat is reimagined as the five-headed queen of evil dragons, each head a different color and breathing a different form of destructive energy. This adaptation brilliantly captures her core essence as a mother of monsters and a font of chaos, translating her mythological role into a tangible, stat-blocked antagonist for heroes to face. Her influence extends to video games as well. In the Final Fantasy series, she often appears as a high-level summon or a fearsome enemy, a winged, multi-headed beast unleashing elemental fury. This modern reinterpretation is more than just a borrowing of a cool name. It demonstrates how Tiamat's core symbolism, the untamable, chaotic, and generative force of nature, continues to resonate. We no longer fear the sea in the same way the Babylonians did, But we have new existential fears, the chaos of a world without order, the destructive power of unchecked ambition, and the monstrous potential lurking within the unknown. Tiamat provides a perfect primordial archetype for these fears, a villain whose scale is literally cosmic. Beyond fantasy gaming, Tiamat's influence seeps into modern literary and ecological thought. She has been reclaimed by some as a powerful feminist symbol, a representation of the primordial mother goddess whose body was violently divided by a patriarchal sky god to impose a new hierarchical order. In this reading, her defeat is not a triumphant victory for civilization, but a tragic story of the dismemberment of the feminine divine and the subjugation of the natural world by a more rigid technological authority. Furthermore, in an age of climate change and rising sea levels, Tiamat's story takes on a new, ominous relevance. The chaotic, primeval sea that was once defeated and ordered is now, in a sense, reawakening. The polar ice caps, which we have conceptually tamed, are melting and the oceans are rising, threatening to reclaim coastal cities and reassert their ancient, formless power. Tiamat can be seen as a metaphor for this planetary backlash, a chilling reminder that the order we have built our world upon is fragile, and the primordial chaos we thought we had conquered may simply have been waiting. Her enduring legacy, from a 4,000-year-old cuneiform tablet to a modern game board, shows that the human psyche has always recognized a profound truth about the sea and the world it represents. It is the source of all life, but it is also the ultimate, indifferent power that can, at any moment, choose to take everything back. Perhaps no other classical sea monster left a more indelible mark on both the ancient and the Renaissance imagination than the Cetus, a creature whose story was so powerful it was literally written in the stars. In ancient Greek art, depictions of the confrontation between Perseus and the Cetus were a popular subject, appearing on everything from grand ceramic vases to intricate mosaic floors. The monster was rarely portrayed as a simple whale or serpent. Instead, artists crafted a terrifying hybrid, a true chimera of the deep. Often, it possesses the gaping, tooth-filled maw of a ferocious shark, a body with the sheer bulk of a whale, and sometimes even the scaly skin and flippers of a reptile or the forelimbs of a lion. This artistic choice was deliberate, combining the most frightening aspects of known predators into one ultimate marine horror. On a famous 5th century BC water jar, for instance, we see the Cetus rearing up from the waves, its monstrous head turned toward the hero Perseus, who is frozen in the act of rescuing Andromeda. The creature's body is coiled and powerful, a mass of muscle and menace, visually communicating the immense danger that a single hero must overcome. These depictions were not just decoration, they were a form of storytelling, reinforcing the cultural ideals of heroism, divine favor, and the triumph of civilized order over the untamable chaos of the natural world. This mythic battle was so significant that the Greeks immortalized it in the heavens, giving the Cetus a permanent home as a constellation in the night sky. Located in a region of the celestial sphere rich with other mythological figures from the Perseus saga, the constellation Cetus is one of the largest in the sky, a sprawling pattern of stars that the ancient astronomers visualized as the sea monster's long, serpentine body. Fittingly, it is positioned near the constellations of Perseus, Andromeda, and even her parents Cepheus and Cassiopeia, forever reenacting the celestial drama. While it may not be the brightest constellation, its sheer size and its place within this cosmic family group ensured that the story would be told and retold for millennia, every time someone looked up at the stars. This act of celestial cartography elevated the Cetus from a one-off monster in a local myth to a fundamental part of the cosmic order, a reminder that the gods' victories over chaos were literally mapped onto the fabric of the universe itself. It transformed the monster into a permanent, if subdued, fixture of the night, a conquered terror now fixed in place for all eternity. centuries later, as Europe emerged from the Middle Ages and rediscovered classical learning, the myth of Perseus and the Cetus experienced a spectacular renaissance. The story provided everything Renaissance and Baroque artists adored: drama, pathos, a heroic nude, a damsel in distress, and a fantastical monster that allowed for boundless artistic license. In the hands of masters like Piero di Cosimo and later Peter Paul Rubens, the scene exploded with emotional and physical intensity. Piero's 15th century painting, Perseus freeing Andromeda, presents a Cetus that is less a hybrid and more a bizarre, dragon-like creature with an almost canine face, its strange form emphasizing the otherworldly nature of the threat. The focus is on the moment of liberation, with Andromeda's vulnerability contrasting with the monster's peculiar, almost sorrowful death. It was the Flemish Baroque master Peter Paul Rubens, however, who truly captured the scene's full visceral power. In his early 17th century masterpiece, the Cetus is a behemoth of blubber and flesh, a mountain of a creature that seems to embody the very weight and darkness of the sea. Rubens uses his signature dynamism. The monster is not just dead, but in the violent throes of death, its massive body contorted as it succumbs to the hero's blade. The painting is a cacophony of emotion: Andromeda's relief, Perseus's triumphant stance, the celebratory energy of the Cupids, and the raw, dying energy of the beast itself. This was no longer a symbolic monster from a star chart. It was a tangible, physical adversary, rendered with a shocking realism that made the myth feel immediate and visceral. The Cetus in these works became a canvas upon which artists could project their deepest fears and greatest artistic ambitions, proving that a monster born in the ancient world could continue to evolve and terrify audiences over 1,000 years later. Its journey from a vase painting to a constellation to a Baroque masterpiece shows how a single, powerful story can weave itself through human culture, adapting to new eras while never losing its core power to captivate and horrify. Yet, for all the dramatic spectacle of painted monsters, the true engine that drove the belief in sea serpents through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance was not an artist's brush, but the authoritative pen of a first-century Roman admiral. Pliny the Elder was not a storyteller. He was a compiler of what he believed to be factual knowledge, a man who famously died in the eruption of Vesuvius because he insisted on sailing closer to investigate the phenomenon. His monumental work, the Naturalis Historia, was a 37-volume encyclopedia intended to catalogue everything known about the natural world, from agriculture to zoology. It is within this framework of supposed empiricism that we find his descriptions of sea monsters, presented not as myth but as reported fact. Pliny writes of immense sea serpents encountered by Roman fleets, creatures so vast they could challenge warships. In one gripping account, he describes a naval commander off the coast of North Africa being forced to engage a serpent of colossal proportions, a beast that rose from the water to confront the vessels, its size and power requiring the full might of military ballistae and catapults to repel. What lends Pliny's accounts their initial air of credibility is his methodology. He explicitly states that he compiled his work from thousands of sources, drawing from the logs of sailors, the reports of military expeditions, and the writings of earlier Greek and Roman authors. He was, in a sense, the ultimate fact-checker of the ancient world, or so he presented himself. The problem, of course, is that Pliny was often critically uncritical. He rarely distinguished between a sober account from a reliable witness and a second-hand tale told over wine in a distant port. For him, the act of recording a story in a written source granted it a certain legitimacy, and his own position as a military commander gave him a predisposition to trust the reports of fellow soldiers and sailors. This blending of genuine observation, such as descriptions of large whales or giant squid, with exaggerated sailors' yarns and outright mythological creatures, created a potent mixture that would be mistaken for pure science for over 1,000 years. The true power of Pliny's work, however, lies not in its Roman context, but in its profound and enduring influence on the medieval mind. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, much of the granular, practical knowledge of the classical world was lost in Europe. Pliny's Naturalis Historia, however, survived. It became one of the most copied and revered texts in monastic libraries, a precious relic of ancient wisdom. For medieval scholars who had little means or impetus to conduct maritime exploration of their own, Pliny was not just a source of information, he was the authority on natural philosophy. His claims were repeated, illustrated, and elaborated upon without a shred of skepticism. If Pliny said there were sea serpents large enough to drag down a trireme, then it must be so. This uncritical adoption is vividly displayed in the medieval bestiaries, those beautifully illuminated books of beasts. The creatures within the whale that pretends to be an island, the sawfish that cuts ships in half, are often directly lifted from Pliny's descriptions, but now framed within a rigid Christian moral allegory. The sea monster was no longer just a physical danger reported by a Roman admiral. It was now a symbol of the devil, a lurking representation of sin that threatened to pull the unwary Christian soul into the abyss. Pliny's secular reports were baptized into the service of the church, his empirical tone lending divine weight to moral lessons. This scholarly tradition reached its zenith in the work of encyclopedists like Isidore of Seville in the 7th century and Vincent of Beauvais in the 13th. These men, seeking to compile all human knowledge, used Pliny as a foundational source. Isidore's Etymologiae borrowed heavily from the Naturalis Historia, perpetuating the descriptions of sea monsters and other wonders for centuries. The credibility of these later works was entirely parasitic on Pliny's own, because Isidore and Vincent were considered authorities, and because they cited Pliny, his original accounts were further insulated from critical scrutiny. This created a closed loop of scholarship where ancient assertions were repeated for centuries without ever being tested against observable reality. The mapmakers of the era, such as the creators of the Hereford Mappa Mundi, then translated these textual monsters into visual form, placing them in the uncharted waters at the edge of the world. For a medieval viewer, the presence of a sea serpent on a map was not a decorative flourish. It was a factual warning based on the highest scholarly authority available. The monster on the map was there because Pliny the Elder, a respected Roman scholar, had documented its existence. This fusion of classical authority, Christian morality, and cartographic practice meant that the sea serpent became an unshakable feature of the European worldview, a testament to the immense power of a single, influential text to shape the perception of reality for generations. Pliny's legacy, therefore, is a double-edged sword. He preserved a vast amount of classical knowledge that might otherwise have been lost, but he also preserved and legitimized its errors, embedding giant sea creatures so deeply into the fabric of Western thought that it would take the radical skepticism of the Enlightenment to even begin to pry them loose. Now let's dive into the chilling legend of the Yumabazu, a sea spirit from Japanese folklore that embodies the ocean's most terrifying and unpredictable nature. The name itself, translating to sea monk, offers a crucial clue to its origins. This creature is almost always depicted as a colossal, dark, humanoid figure with a large, smooth, bald head, rising from the water like a monstrous, demented version of a Buddhist monk. This visual is deeply rooted in Japan's religious and cultural fabric, a blend of Shinto animism which sees spirits or kami in all natural phenomena and Buddhist cosmology, which includes a vast pantheon of deities and demons. The ocean, or Yumi, was one of the most powerful and capricious kami, a force that could provide sustenance through fishing and trade, but could just as easily snatch lives away with a sudden typhoon or a rogue wave. The Yumabazu is a personification of this dual nature. Its monk-like appearance is a grotesque parody of a figure meant to represent peace and enlightenment, twisting it into a symbol of the sea's cruel indifference. The spirit doesn't just represent a storm, it represents the eerie, unnatural calm that can precede a storm, the moment of false security before the ocean reveals its true destructive power. It is the kami of the deep, specifically as a vengeful or malevolent entity, rising to punish those who trespass on its domain without the proper respect, or who simply have the misfortune of being in the wrong place at the absolute worst time. The typical encounter narrative with the Yumabazu follows a hauntingly specific and psychologically terrifying pattern. A ship would find itself sailing on an unnervingly calm, glassy sea, the air still and heavy. Without warning, this massive, dark form would surface silently beside the vessel, its head looming high above the deck. In some versions of the tale, the Yumabazu would simply use its immense hands to capsize the boat, sending all aboard to their doom. In other, more psychologically intricate stories, it would speak, its voice echoing across the water as it demanded a single, seemingly innocuous object, a barrel. To a terrified crew, this might seem like a bizarre but easy request to fulfill, a chance to appease the monster and survive, but this is where the trap is sprung. If the sailors handed over the barrel, the Yumabazu would not depart. Instead, it would use the barrel to scoop up seawater, which it would then pour back into the ship, deliberately flooding the vessel until it sank. This specific detail transforms the Yumabazu from a mindless force of nature into a cunning, intelligent predator that actively engineers its victims' destruction, forcing them to participate in their own demise. It's a narrative that speaks to a profound sense of helplessness. There is no correct choice, no way to win. Whether you fight, flee, or comply, the outcome is the same, a one-way journey to the bottom of the sea. So, what could explain such a persistent and detailed legend? One compelling theory lies in the realm of psychology and the extreme conditions of life at sea. Sailors on long voyages, particularly in the eras of wooden ships, faced immense physical and mental strain. They endured sleep deprivation, dehydration, and malnutrition, all of which are known to trigger vivid hallucinations and paranoid delusions. A condition like scurvy caused by a lack of vitamin C could lead to confusion, depression, and even psychosis. In such a state, a half-asleep lookout peering into the fog might misinterpret a large, dark wave or a peculiar rock formation as a monstrous humanoid figure. The barrel the Yumabazu demands could be a dream-like distortion of a real, urgent task on a sinking ship, like bailing water, twisted by a feverish mind into a supernatural command. Furthermore, the phenomenon of sleep paralysis, a state where the mind wakes up but the body remains temporarily paralyzed, often accompanied by a terrifying sense of a sinister presence, could easily be interpreted as a visit from the Yumabazu, especially when it occurs in the cramped, dark quarters of a ship. The spirit's silent, looming appearance matches the archetypal, shadowy figure of sleep paralysis hallucinations almost perfectly. In this light, the Yumabazu becomes a folkloric explanation for a very real and frightening psychological experience, a name given to the shared hallucination of an exhausted and terrified crew. Beyond pure psychology, there are also potential environmental misidentifications that could have fueled the myth. The waters around Japan are home to giant squid, creatures that can reach lengths of over 40 feet. While they live in the deep, a dying or distressed giant squid rising to the surface, its long, pale arms trailing beneath its massive mantle, could present a startling and otherworldly sight in the dim light. Its mantle, viewed from a certain angle by a superstitious crew, might be mistaken for a large, bald head. Another natural candidate is the rare and bizarre ocean sunfish, or mola, a creature that can weigh over 2 tons and has a strange, almost disc-like body that sometimes floats vertically on the surface. Its unusual shape and immense size could certainly be misconstrued as something monstrous, especially when seen briefly through spray and mist. Then there are more dramatic oceanic events like the sudden formation of a waterspout, a tornado over water, which can create a dark, columnar shape that seems to rise from the sea itself. The sudden, glassy calm that often precedes the Yumabazu's appearance is a well-documented meteorological phenomenon that occurs before the arrival of a sudden squall or a rogue wave. A crew witnessing the sea turn eerily flat and still, only to see a dark waterspout form on the horizon, might logically connect the two events into a single narrative. The calm is the monster's lure, and the spout is the monster itself, reaching out to destroy them. The legend of the Yumabazu, therefore, stands at a fascinating crossroads. It is a powerful cultural archetype born from Shinto and Buddhist tradition, a plausible psychological explanation for the traumas of seafaring life, and a potential misinterpretation of real but poorly understood marine phenomena. It shows us that folklore is rarely just a simple story. It is often a complex tapestry woven from the threads of genuine human experience, fear, and the eternal, daunting mystery of the sea. For the Vikings, the sea was not an empty expanse but a living road, a path to glory, trade, and new lands, but it was also a domain filled with invisible threats that could end a voyage in an instant. When their sagas and runestones speak of the sea orm or half-ormer, they were describing something far more tangible than a mere creature of folklore. These orms are a word that gives us our modern worm, but meant any serpentine or dragon-like beast were logged by navigators with the same sober seriousness as a sudden squall or a hidden iceberg. They were considered a genuine navigational hazard, a predatory force as real as any storm. Imagine a longship, its dragon-headed prow slicing through the cold, grey waters of the North Atlantic. The crew, reliant on the sun and stars and the color of the water to guide them, would be constantly scanning the horizon for signs of danger. A dark, coiling shape spotted in the water wasn't a myth, it was a direct threat to their survival. The sagas describe these orms as beings of immense length and power, capable of rising from the depths to wrap their sinuous bodies around a vessel, crushing the wooden hull and dragging the splintered wreckage and its crew down into the abyss. This was not an abstract fear. In the unforgiving environment of the northern seas, where a single breach could sink a ship in minutes, the concept of a sea orm served as a powerful, personified explanation for a host of very real and lethal maritime phenomena. What exactly were the Vikings seeing that they interpreted as these monstrous serpents? The most likely explanations are a collection of natural dangers that would have been terrifyingly familiar to any experienced sailor. One primary candidate is the treacherous whirlpool, a common feature in the narrow channels and between the islands of the Scandinavian coastline. The violent, churning water of a maelstrom, with its dark, spiraling center and powerful suction, could easily be visualized as a colossal serpent coiling beneath the surface, its movement creating a vortex meant to swallow ships whole. Then there were the hidden reefs and rocky shoals lying just below the waterline. A longship moving at speed could be torn apart in an instant by an unseen rock. To a crew watching from a distance, the way the waves broke over a submerged ridge could create the illusion of a humped, serpentine back moving just beneath the surface. Even known marine life could contribute to the legend. A pod of whales swimming in a line, their dark backs rhythmically breaking the surface, perfectly matches the classic description of a multi-humped sea serpent. A giant squid with its long, grasping tentacles might be seen in a rare surface encounter and its parts misinterpreted as the limbs of a monstrous worm. For the Vikings, who lacked our scientific understanding of oceanography, attributing these unpredictable and destructive forces to a single, intelligent, malevolent entity was a logical way to make sense of a world ruled by chaos. The sea orm was the name they gave to the ocean's inherent lethality, a way to categorize and personify the countless unseen dangers that waited to claim their ships and their lives. Beyond their role as physical hazards, the sea orms held a much deeper cosmological significance in the Norse worldview. They were not random monsters but integral boundary beings, entities that defined the edges between the ordered world of humans and the chaotic, primordial forces that surrounded it. This concept finds its ultimate expression in Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, but the lesser sea orms of the sagas operated on the same metaphysical principle. In Norse cosmology, the universe was structured around a great world tree, Yggdrasil, with the realm of humans, Midgard, situated at its center. Encircling Midgard was the vast, unmeasured ocean, and beyond that lay the chaotic void of Utgarda, the outer yards. The sea was the literal and symbolic boundary between these two states of existence. The sea orms were the guardians and inhabitants of this liminal space. They existed in the frontier between the known and the unknown, the safe and the perilous. To encounter one was to venture too far, to cross from the charted waters of human experience into the domain of the giants and the gods. This symbolic role transformed the orm from a simple animal into a mythic signpost. Its appearance was a warning that a crew was approaching the absolute limits of the world, a place where the normal rules of reality began to break down. This belief was reinforced by the practical reality of Viking exploration. As they pushed further into the North Atlantic, discovering Iceland and Greenland, they were literally sailing off the edge of their known maps, entering a world where legend and landscape blurred into one. The sea orm was the embodiment of that thrilling, terrifying frontier, a constant reminder that their courage and seamanship were all that stood between the order of their community and the formless chaos of the outer dark. This dual identity, as both a practical navigational warning and a profound cosmic symbol, reveals the sophisticated way the Vikings understood their relationship with the sea. The orm was a mnemonic device, a story passed from one generation of sailors to the next that encoded vital survival information. A tale about a particular fjord being haunted by a serpent was likely a folk memory of a particularly dangerous tidal race or a submerged rock that had claimed ships in the past. By giving the danger a name and a form, the knowledge became more memorable and more effectively communicated. At the same time, the orm's symbolic power reinforced the cultural values of courage, skill, and resilience. To be a Viking was to confront these terrors directly. The hero in the saga who faced down a sea orm was not just surviving an animal attack, he was asserting the power of human order over cosmic chaos. He was defending the boundaries of Midgard itself. This intertwining of the literal and the metaphorical is what makes the Viking sea orm such a compelling figure. It was not a superstition born of ignorance, but a complex cultural tool, a way to map both the physical dangers of the ocean and the spiritual structure of the universe, all wrapped into the terrifying, coiling form of a beast that waited for them in the grey waters at the edge of the world. Delving into the name Siren Croin itself opens a window into the Gaelic soul, revealing a culture that saw language as a living, descriptive force. The name is often interpreted as deriving from siren, meaning a comb or crest, and crow, meaning a pen or enclosure, but also carrying connotations of blood or gore. Together, they paint a vivid picture, the crested one of the bloody enclosure. This isn't just a label, it's a poetic evocation of the creature's most feared features. The serrated, comb-like spine that would break the surface of the water as it moved, and its penchant for creating a slaughterhouse in the sea, an enclosure of bloody water where it devoured its prey. This linguistic depth transforms the siren Croin from a simple monster into a layered concept, a being defined by its terrifying physicality and its gruesome diet. The name functions as a miniature story, a compressed warning that would instantly convey the creature's nature to any Gaelic-speaking fisherman, imbuing the very sound of its name with a sense of dread and awe for the destructive power it represented. To fully understand the siren Croin's place in the world, we must situate it among its Celtic cousins, where it emerges as the undisputed leviathan of a rich maritime mythology. In the Irish tradition, we find the Muadris, a fearsome sea monster known for its poisonous breath that could contaminate an entire lake, making its waters undrinkable and its fish inedible. The siren Croin shares this theme of immense ecosystem-threatening power, but on a far grander oceanic scale. Then there is the oarfish, a great serpent or dragon from Irish lore that was often said to have been driven from the land by a saint, forced to carve out a new river channel as it fled to the sea. While the oarfish is a land-born terror banished to the water, the siren crane is a native monarch of the deep, a permanent, established ruler of its domain. Perhaps the most telling comparison is with the more familiar kelpie, the Scottish waterhorse. The kelpie is a shape-shifting personal predator, luring individuals to a watery doom. The siren crane operates on an entirely different level. It doesn't bother with deception or single victims. Its predation is wholesale, a force of nature that consumes other giants. This hierarchy is crucial. The siren crane sits at the absolute apex of the Celtic bestiary, a creature so vast it makes other legendary monsters seem like mere prey, establishing a clear food chain of fear within the mythological ecosystem itself. These legends were far more than simple campfire stories. They served as sophisticated cultural tools, functioning as both moral compasses and pre-scientific explanations for a volatile and often deadly natural world. On one level, the siren crane acted as a powerful moral allegory about the dangers of greed and hubris. The idea of a creature so insatiable it could swallow 7 whales was a vivid, hyperbolic warning against overconsumption and the monstrous consequences of unchecked appetite, whether for food, wealth, or power. For a coastal community living a precarious existence, such a tale reinforced the values of moderation and respect for the bounty of the sea, a reminder that taking too much could awaken a terrible retribution. On a more practical, scientific level, these stories provided a framework for understanding the brutal and inexplicable dangers of the North Atlantic. The sudden, complete disappearance of a fishing boat with all hands, the mysterious destruction of nets, or the sight of a group of whales being attacked by an unseen force, these were real, traumatic events that demanded an explanation. Before the concepts of rogue waves, sudden squalls, or the feeding frenzies of large predators like orcas were understood, the siren crane offered a tangible cause. It gave a name and a face to the chaos, transforming a random, senseless tragedy into a narrative. This provided a form of psychological comfort. It was less terrifying to believe that a specific, knowable monster had taken your kin than to accept that the sea was an indifferent, unpredictable void where lives could be erased for no reason at all. The legend thus served as a coping mechanism, allowing communities to process loss and impart crucial survival wisdom to the next generation, ensuring that the deep, dark waters were always approached with the caution and reverence they demanded. What began as a strange ripple in the harbor of a quiet New England fishing town quickly swelled into one of the first major media storms in American history. In August 1817, Gloucester, Massachusetts, became the epicenter of a phenomenon that would capture the nation's imagination and forever change how we report on the unexplained. It started with a handful of fishermen reporting a creature of impossible dimensions, but it was the local newspaper, the Gloucester Gazette, that gave the beast its voice and its audience. The paper didn't just report the sightings, it actively fueled the story, publishing sworn affidavits from ship captains, respected merchants, and even a local justice of the peace, all testifying to the same incredible sight. Their descriptions were remarkably consistent and chillingly detailed. A dark, serpentine form, as long as 100 feet, with a head like a horse or a giant turtle, held proudly several feet above the water. They spoke of a body as thick as a barrel, moving with a vertical, undulating motion, like a massive, living ribbon gliding through the calm harbor waters. This wasn't a fleeting glimpse in a storm. This was a creature that seemed to be putting on a show, seen by dozens of reputable citizens over several weeks. The Gazette's breathless coverage was picked up by papers in Boston and then New York, transforming a local curiosity into a national talking point. For the first time, a sea serpent wasn't just a legend from musty old books or the tall tales of returning sailors. It was a breaking news event, complete with named witnesses and a specific location, creating a template for sensational cryptid reporting that tabloids and news channels would follow for the next 2 centuries. The sheer volume of credible testimony from level-headed New England mariners could not be ignored by the scientific community of the day. This was the early 19th century, a time when naturalists believed the world was still full of undiscovered giants. Into this atmosphere of curiosity stepped the Linnean Society of New England, a respected body of scholars based in Boston. They did something unprecedented. They launched a formal, scientific investigation into the Gloucester serpent. A committee was formed, and they traveled to the town to interview witnesses firsthand, collecting detailed statements and attempting to piece together a coherent physical description of the animal. The Society's resulting report was a landmark document in the history of cryptozoology. In a move that was both bold and, in hindsight, deeply premature, they didn't just affirm the creature's existence, they attempted to classify it. They gave it a formal Latin binomial, Scoliophis atlanticus, meaning the Atlantic humped snake, and published a detailed anatomical description based entirely on the eyewitness accounts. This act of naming was profoundly significant. It elevated the creature from the realm of folklore to the domain of potential science, suggesting that this was not a phantom but a genuine, if elusive, species awaiting formal discovery. The report itself was a curious mix of rigorous methodology and unsupported leaps of faith, but its very existence signaled a new era. It was the first time a major scientific institution had treated a sea serpent report with such seriousness, setting a precedent for future investigations into Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and other cryptids, where the line between zoological inquiry and popular fascination would forever be blurred. The legacy of the Gloucester sea serpent, however, is a complex tapestry woven from genuine mystery, burgeoning media power, and the inherent limitations of eyewitness testimony. In the cold light of historical analysis, modern skeptics have offered a range of plausible explanations for what the people of Gloucester actually saw. The most compelling theory points to a known but still spectacular marine animal, the humpback whale. When a humpback engages in a behavior called bow riding, or repeatedly arches its back as it prepares to dive, the line of its spine breaking the water can create a perfect illusion of a chain of humps. If seen from a distance or an odd angle with the head and tail submerged, the effect is uncannily serpentine. Another strong candidate is a group of animals, not a single entity. A pod of seals or dolphins swimming in a tight, synchronized line would create a series of breaking ripples that, to an eager eye, could easily be misinterpreted as the humps of a single, massive creature. The famous vertical undulation could be explained by the rolling motion of a large basking shark, whose enormous tail and dorsal fin can create a similar wave-like pattern. Yet, even with these rational explanations, the Gloucester case refuses to be completely solved. The sheer number of witnesses, their consistency over weeks, and the specific details about the turtle-like head remain difficult to fully dismiss. More importantly, the event itself became a cultural touchstone. It demonstrated the power of the printing press to create a modern legend. It showed how science could be both intrigued and embarrassed by the paranormal, and it established the sea serpent as a permanent fixture of the American imagination. The Gloucester serpent was the first cryptid of the media age, a creature born not just from the ocean, but from the ink-stained pages of a newspaper, proving that a story could be just as powerful and just as real to the public as any physical evidence. Hans Egede was no ordinary sailor or adventurer. He was a Lutheran missionary from Norway, a man whose entire purpose in Greenland was grounded in faith, doctrine, and the conversion of the Inuit people to Christianity. His worldview was one of strict biblical literalism, where the natural world was a creation of God and supernatural events were manifestations of divine will, not the animistic spirits of indigenous belief. So when, in 1734, his ship encountered what he described as a terrifying sea monster off the western coast of Greenland, his account was filtered through this powerful religious lens. He wrote in his journal of a creature that lifted itself so high that its head was level with the ship's maintop, describing a long, serpentine body, a pointed snout, and broad, powerful flippers. For Eged, this was not merely a strange animal. It was a manifestation of the Leviathan mentioned in the book of Job, a direct example of the monstrous wonders held within God's creation, intended to inspire both fear and reverence. His detailed description and the accompanying illustration published later were presented with the unwavering authority of a pious man who had witnessed a biblical-scale marvel, an account that carried immense weight precisely because of his identity as a sober, devout missionary, not a superstitious mariner. Yet, to understand the full significance of Eged's sighting, we must step back and consider the cultural environment in which he was immersed. The Inuit communities he lived among and sought to convert possessed a rich and complex spiritual relationship with the Arctic Sea, a worldview entirely different from his own. Their survival depended on the ocean, and their folklore was populated by powerful, often dangerous water spirits. One of the most feared was the Tijuruk, a massive, serpentine creature said to lurk in the cracks of the sea ice, snatching people and animals from the shore with lightning speed. Another was the Amakjuak, a giant worm-like being believed to inhabit the deep waters. For the Inuit, these were not mythical beasts in a far-off biblical sense. They were tangible spiritual forces, explanations for sudden disappearances, cracked ice, and the unpredictable dangers of their environment. When Eged arrived, he was entering a conversation that had been ongoing for centuries, a dialogue between the Inuit and the sea, narrated through these powerful entities. It is almost certain that he would have heard their stories, their warnings, and their descriptions of these aquatic beings. His own sighting, therefore, cannot be viewed in a vacuum. It was likely shaped, perhaps subconsciously, by this cross-cultural exchange. The monster he saw and meticulously documented may have been a genuine, unexplained marine animal, but the form he gave it, the specific details of its serpentine nature and its fearsome power was inevitably influenced by the pre-existing monster lore of the people he lived alongside. His account becomes a fascinating fusion, a Christian interpretation of a creature that already lived in the Arctic imagination. This interaction between Eged's European Christianity and Inuit animism highlights a crucial, often overlooked mechanism in the creation of global monster legends, the role of cultural exchange at the frontiers of exploration. When two cultures with different belief systems collide, their monster narratives don't just coexist, they can blend, borrow, and reinforce one another. A European missionary, steeped in tales of leviathans and sea serpents, arrives in a land where the indigenous people speak of the Tijuruk. He witnesses a large, unfamiliar marine animal, perhaps a giant squid, a stranded oarfish, or even a poorly seen whale. His brain, seeking to categorize the uncategorizable, reaches for the closest reference points available. He has the biblical Leviathan from his own tradition, and now he has the detailed, visceral descriptions of the Tijuruk from his new environment. The resulting account, like Eged's, becomes a hybrid. It gains the authority of the reliable European witness while being colored by the specific characteristics of local lore. This process didn't just happen in the Arctic. We see it with the bunyip in Australia, where European settlers absorbed Aboriginal descriptions to shape their own reports, and with the Ogopogo in Canada, where settler sightings directly mirrored the indigenous Nhaaic legends. These cross-cultural encounters acted as a catalyst, taking vague fears of the deep and giving them a specific, culturally transmitted form, ensuring that the monsters reported by explorers were often reflections of the very people they were attempting to convert or colonize. Eged's legacy, therefore, is twofold. He left behind a cornerstone sea serpent account that will be cited for centuries, but he also left us a perfect case study in how our deepest fears of the unknown are never truly our own. They are shaped by the stories we hear, the people we meet, and the shared primal desire to give a name to the giants that swim in the dark waters at the edge of the map. While the legends of Selma have been told for centuries, the modern era has brought new tools to this ancient mystery, transforming folklore into a technological treasure hunt. The deep, dark waters of Lake Seljord, long a barrier to discovery, became the target for scientific investigation, most notably in the groundbreaking Operation Selma expedition of 2007. This wasn't a group of amateur enthusiasts with binoculars. It was a coordinated effort led by Jan Sundberg's international research team, GUST, which deployed state-of-the-art sonar equipment to scan the lake's hidden contours. For the first time, investigators could peer beneath the surface without being hindered by the lake's notorious murkiness, and what they found sent ripples of excitement through the cryptozoology world. The sonar recorded multiple significant contacts with large, animate objects moving independently in the deep water. One contact in particular was staggering, an object estimated to be between 30 and 40 feet long, holding a steady depth before moving off at a speed that ruled out any known fish in the lake. This was not a log, a temperature inversion, or a school of perch. This was a solid mass of immense proportions behaving like a living creature. While the evidence stopped short of being definitive proof, it provided the most compelling scientific data yet that Lake Seljord holds something large and unexplained, giving the legend of Selma a powerful 21st century credibility that eyewitness accounts alone could never achieve. This tangible evidence, combined with the persistent local lore, has transformed the town of Seljord into a thriving hub of monster tourism, demonstrating the powerful economic impact a good legend can have on a small community. The creature is no longer just a local curiosity. It is the centerpiece of the town's identity and a key driver of its economy. You can see Selma's influence everywhere. She is proudly displayed on the town's official coat of arms, a unique honor for a cryptid. The local library features an entire section dedicated to the monster, and souvenir shops are filled with Selma-themed merchandise, from plush toys and keychains to locally brewed Selma beer. The commitment culminates in the annual Seljord Summer Festival, which attracts visitors from across Norway and beyond, all hoping for a glimpse of the famous resident. This embrace of the monster has created a self-sustaining cycle. The tourism revenue provides a clear, practical incentive for the community to keep the story alive, funding local businesses and putting the otherwise quiet region on the map. In turn, the constant stream of visitors and media attention ensures that new sightings are reported and investigated, feeding the legend with fresh oxygen and keeping the mystery vibrantly alive for the next generation. The monster has become, in a very real sense, the town's most valuable citizen. Ultimately, the story of Selma in the 21st century is a fascinating case study of how a community consciously and lovingly perpetuates its own legend. Unlike the terrifying sea monsters of old, Selma is almost universally portrayed as a benign, even gentle giant. This friendly monster narrative is a deliberate and brilliant cultural strategy. It invites curiosity rather than fear, encouraging tourism and exploration instead of driving people away. Local authorities and business owners actively promote the legend, understanding that the mystery itself is the real attraction. They don't need to produce a carcass. The enduring question is far more valuable. This modern relationship with a lake monster stands in stark contrast to the dread inspired by the Yumabazu or the cosmic threat of Jörmungandr. It shows how our perception of these creatures has evolved from symbols of pure terror into potential partners in a shared story, a source of communal pride and economic sustenance. The people of Seljord are not dupes, they are savvy custodians of a wonderful mystery. They have taken the raw material of their ancestral folklore and, with the help of sonar technology and marketing savvy, have built a lasting legacy that proves a monster in the lake can be worth far more than just a story. It can be the very heart of a community, a living legend that continues to draw the world to its shores. But perhaps the most compelling piece of physical evidence in the entire Cady saga emerged not from a camera, but from the stomach of a whale. In 1937, a sperm whale was harpooned near Naddon Harbor in the Queen Charlotte Islands, and when it was processed at a local whaling station, a bizarre carcass was discovered coiled within its stomach. This was not a seal or a known fish. It was a long, serpentine creature with a horse-like head and a body featuring a series of humps. Photographs were taken, and samples of its flesh and vertebrae were sent for analysis. The initial report from the station manager identified it as a fetal baleen whale, but this explanation was immediately controversial. The Naddon Harbor carcass, as it became known, did not look like any known whale fetus. Its neck was too long and flexible, its head too distinctly equine. For cryptozoologists, this was the holy grail, a tangible, biological sample that seemed to match the descriptions of Cadborosaurus perfectly. Tragically, the carcass itself was lost, likely discarded or buried, leaving only the grainy black and white photographs and conflicting reports as testament to its existence. This loss is a defining tragedy in cryptozoology, a what-if scenario that continues to fuel the debate. Was it a rare, decomposed basking shark whose cartilaginous skeleton can collapse into a serpentine form? Or was it, as believers hope, the remains of the creature itself, a fleeting glimpse of a genuine, yet to be classified denizen of the deep, captured and then lost to history? The Naddon Harbor incident remains a powerful, unresolved piece of the puzzle, a ghost of evidence that refuses to be entirely dismissed. Driven by such tantalizing clues, dedicated researchers have spent decades attempting to apply scientific rigor to the Cady mystery. The most prominent figure in this effort is Dr. Paul LeBlanc, a respected oceanographer from the University of British Columbia. Alongside author John Kirk, LeBlanc co-authored a seminal book, Cadborosaurus, Survivor from the Deep, in which he argues that the sheer volume and consistency of eyewitness reports cannot be ignored. LeBlanc approached the subject not as a believer in myth, but as a scientist confronted with anomalous data. He and his colleagues meticulously analyzed sightings, plotted them on maps, and looked for patterns in the creature's reported behavior and morphology. Their work moved the discussion beyond mere anecdote, suggesting that if Cady is real, it could be a species of long-necked marine mammal, perhaps a relative of the zeuglodont, an ancient group of prehistoric whales. Other cryptozoologists have proposed it could be a giant, unidentified species of sea cucumber or a monstrous eel, though these theories struggle to account for the consistent descriptions of a distinct neck and head. These investigations, while operating on the fringes of mainstream science, highlight a crucial human endeavor, the attempt to bring order to the unknown. The cryptozoologists studying Cady are, in their own way, continuing the tradition of the early naturalists, venturing into a world where the official maps of biology still have blank spaces, insisting that the testimony of countless observers deserves a hearing, even if the proof remains just out of reach. Ultimately, the story of the Cadborosaurus has transcended its status as a mere cryptid to become a deeply ingrained part of the cultural identity of the Pacific Northwest. Unlike the terrifying monsters of old, Cady is largely viewed as a benign and fascinating part of the local lore. Its image is celebrated in community festivals, depicted in local art, and used as a charming mascot for various businesses. This embrace reflects a regional pride in the wild, untamed nature of the British Columbia coastline. The creature symbolizes the idea that even in a modern, technologically advanced world, there are still mysteries lurking in our own backyard, that the waters lapping at our shores are not fully known or conquered. The legend of Cady serves as a permanent reminder of the ocean's enduring secrets, fostering a sense of wonder and a connection to the natural world that is both vast and mysterious. It encourages people to look out at the gray, churning waters of the Pacific and to wonder, to hope, and to imagine that something spectacular might still be out there, waiting for the next sharp-eyed observer to catch a glimpse of its humped back breaking the surface before it vanishes once more into the deep. Yet the question remains, what could possibly explain such a persistent legend in a modern lake? The most popular and tantalizing theory suggests that Nahulito is not a monster at all, but a living relic, a surviving plesiosaur from the age of dinosaurs. This idea captures the imagination for obvious reasons. The classic description of a long neck and a humped body aligns almost perfectly with the popular image of these prehistoric marine reptiles. Furthermore, the lake's environment seems to support the possibility on the surface. Nahul-Huapi is an immense body of water fed by glacial melt and exceptionally deep, with a complex system of underwater caves and tunnels. Crucially, it is part of a network of interconnected waterways, including other large lakes and rivers that eventually flow to the Pacific Ocean. Proponents of the plesios, or theory, argue that a small population of these creatures could have become trapped in the lake system millennia ago, surviving in the deep, cold, and fish-rich waters, only rarely venturing to the surface and thus evading definitive discovery. This theory transforms the legend from a simple folktale into a thrilling zoological possibility, suggesting that a window to the Cretaceous period might be open in the heart of Patagonia. However, this romantic idea runs into significant scientific hurdles. The most glaring issue is the lake's age and history. While Nahul-Huapi is ancient, its formation is geologically recent compared to the era of the plesiosaur. The lake's basin was carved by glaciers during the last ice age, which ended a mere 12,000 years ago. Plesiosaurs, on the other hand, went extinct 66 million years ago in the same event that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs. For a population to have survived, they would have needed to endure in the oceans for tens of millions of years, only to then become conveniently isolated in a Patagonian lake that did not even exist for the vast majority of that time. Furthermore, the physiology of a reptile like a plesios presents another major problem. As air breathers, they would need to surface regularly, making them far more likely to be consistently observed rather than remaining as elusive phantoms. The cold temperature of the glacial lake would also be inhospitable to a reptile, which typically requires warmer waters to maintain its body temperature. While the image of a living plesiosaur is a powerful and enduring one, the geological and biological evidence makes it a profoundly unlikely explanation, forcing us to look for other sources that may have inspired the legend. A more grounded and perhaps more fascinating origin for the Nahulito story lies not in living dinosaurs but in dead ones. Patagonia is one of the world's most prolific regions for paleontology. For over a century, scientists have been unearthing an incredible array of fossilized giants from its arid badlands, from the colossal Argentinosaurus, one of the largest dinosaurs ever discovered, to the massive marine reptiles like the Plesiosaur that once hunted in the ancient sea that covered the region. These discoveries have been widely publicized in Argentina and are a source of immense national pride. It is almost certain that the local populace, living in a landscape literally littered with the bones of monsters, would absorb this reality into their cultural imagination. The very ground beneath their feet tells them that giants once roamed here. Is it any wonder that they would look out at the largest, deepest lake in the region and wonder if at least one of those giants might have endured? The legend of Nahulito can be seen as a form of living folklore, a myth continuously nourished by the tangible evidence of a prehistoric world that is constantly being dug up all around it. The creature in the lake is a cultural echo of the immense skeletons in the museums, a way for the modern mind to connect with the deep, almost unimaginable history of the land. Beyond the paleontological connections, the story of Nahulito has also been complicated by the very human tendency for deception. Like any good mystery, it has attracted its share of hoaxes, the most famous of which occurred in the early 1960s. A series of photographs allegedly taken by a U.S. Army colonel were published in an Argentine magazine, purportedly showing the creature's humps and neck. These images caused a significant stir, but they were later revealed to be a clever fabrication, possibly involving a submerged model or a doctored photograph. This single incident had a lasting impact, providing skeptics with a ready-made explanation for all subsequent sightings and allowing officials to dismiss reports as the work of pranksters or the gullible. The presence of a known hoax creates a gray area that muddies the entire investigation. For every sincere witness, there is now the lingering doubt that they may have been influenced by the famous fake or that their own sighting could be a copycat hoax. This creates a challenging environment for any serious researcher, as they must first wade through a history of known deceptions to find the kernel of genuine, unexplained phenomena. The hoaxes, in a sense, act as a shield for the real mystery, making it easier for the scientific establishment to ignore the cumulative weight of decades of eyewitness testimony from otherwise credible people. So, where does this leave us with the enigma of Nahulito? The plesios or theory, while compelling, is scientifically problematic. The influence of local fossils provides a powerful cultural context, but it doesn't explain what people continue to see on the water's surface. And while hoaxes certainly exist, they don't account for the vast majority of sincere, often frightened, reports from fishermen and tourists alike. Perhaps the most plausible explanations lie in the realm of known but misunderstood natural phenomena. The lake is home to giant mats of floating vegetation, which can form strange, hump-like shapes as they decompose and release gases. A log buoyed by these same gases could easily resemble a long neck and head when viewed from a distance through the haze of a Patagonian morning. Another strong candidate is the known wildlife. The region is home to a large, introduced population of red deer, and the sight of a stag swimming across the lake with only its head, neck, and the curve of its back visible could be dramatically misinterpreted as a single, serpentine creature. Even unusual wave patterns caused by submerged logs or seismic activity could create the illusion of a moving, humped body. The true identity of Nahulito likely lies in this complex interplay of factors, a legend born from a land of fossil giants, perpetuated by rare but startling misidentifications of ordinary objects, and occasionally amplified by human mischief. It stands as a powerful testament to the fact that a mystery does not need a monstrous solution to be compelling. Sometimes the most fascinating stories are those woven from the rich and tangled threads of geology, biology, and human perception. But to truly grasp the terror of the Lusca, we must first descend into its legendary home, the blue holes of the Bahamas. These are not simply dark patches in the ocean. They are staggering geological formations, vertical caves that plunge hundreds of feet into the limestone bedrock of the Bahamian platform, creating massive, submerged sinkholes. From the surface, they appear as perfect circles of deep, navy blue, a stark and ominous contrast to the surrounding turquoise shallows. Their name comes from this very visual effect, and their formation is a story written over millions of years. During the ice ages, when sea levels were dramatically lower, rainwater, which is slightly acidic, percolated through the ground, slowly dissolving the porous limestone and carving out vast cave systems. When the glaciers melted and the sea levels rose again, these caves flooded, their ceilings sometimes collapsing to create the dramatic, open water voids we see today. The environment within a blue hole is as alien as another planet. The water is stratified into distinct layers. Fresh water from the land often floats on top of dense salt water below, and at a certain depth, a toxic layer of hydrogen sulfide creates a milky, opaque halocline that blocks all light. Below that lies utter darkness, cold and silence, For ancient peoples and even modern divers, these holes were literal gateways to an underworld. The Lusca legend is a perfect narrative fit for this geology. The violent whirlpools the creature creates, those could be the result of tidal currents forcefully flushing water in and out of the submerged cave systems. The sudden disappearance of boats and people, a testament to the unpredictable and powerful suction that can occur at these openings. The Lusca isn't just a monster that lives in a hole, it is the blue hole, a personification of its very real, documented, and lethal forces. When we move from the geological stage to the biological actors that could have inspired the legend, the most obvious candidate is, of course, a giant cephalopod. The Caribbean is home to the Caribbean reef octopus and the common octopus, but the Lusca stories suggest something of a much more colossal scale. While the true giant octopus of the Pacific is not known to inhabit these waters, the very real possibility of an undocumented, deep water species of large octopus is not as far-fetched as it might seem. The extreme depths and labyrinthine tunnels of the blue holes provide an ideal and largely unexplored refuge for such a creature. An octopus, even a large one, possesses all the attributes of the Lusca: immense strength for its size, the ability to change its color and texture for perfect camouflage, and a terrifying intelligence that could be interpreted as malevolent cunning. The description of the Lusca as a hybrid with a shark-like head could be a classic case of mistaken identity in a moment of pure terror. A very large octopus with its bulbous mantle and grasping arms, seen surging from the dark water towards a small boat, could easily have its mantle misinterpreted as a head and its trailing arms seen as a singular, thrashing tail. Furthermore, the octopus's behavior of dwelling in caves and reaching out to grab prey aligns perfectly with the Lusca's modus operandi of hiding in its blue hole lair and snatching victims from the surface. However, the giant octopus is not the only biological explanation. Another compelling candidate lies with the giant squid, which, while an ocean-going creature, could occasionally stray or be washed into the deeper channels near the islands. A giant squid in its death throes, or one hunting in shallow waters at night, would present a spectacle of nightmarish proportions with its long, writhing tentacles and massive eyes. Yet another plausible, if less monstrous, explanation involves a combination of known large marine animals. The powerful Greenland shark, a deep water species that can grow to 20 feet or more, has been found in the Caribbean and is known to inhabit great depths. A shark of this size, seen in the gloom of a blue hole, could form the shark part of the hybrid description. Meanwhile, the giant oceanic manta ray, with its vast, dark wings, could be responsible for the stories of a massive, shadowy form rising from the depths. A fisherman might see the wingtips of a manta breaking the surface, and with a leap of fear-driven logic, combine it with a separate sighting of a large eel or octopus to create the composite image of the Lusca. This blending of different animal encounters into a single super-predator is a common mechanism in the birth of legendary creatures, and the rich, diverse marine life of the Bahamas provides ample raw material for such a synthesis. Ultimately, the enduring power of the Lusca legend lies in its perfect fusion of a terrifying, tangible environment and the very real, yet still mysterious, biology of the deep sea. The blue holes provided the setting, a specific, awe-inspiring, and dangerous location that demanded a story. The occasional, startling encounters with large, poorly understood marine animals provided the characters. The human mind, faced with the sheer scale and hidden danger of the blue holes, did the rest, weaving together geology and biology into a narrative that made sense of the senseless. The Lusca is the name given to the fear of the abyss, the logical conclusion when you live on an archipelago pockmarked with portals to a dark, subterranean world. It is a warning that has likely saved countless lives, deterring people from swimming or boating too close to the treacherous currents of these formations. In the modern age, even as we map these blue holes with sonar and dive them with sophisticated equipment, the mystery hasn't entirely vanished, it has simply deepened. We now know that these holes are time capsules holding ancient fossil remains and unique ecosystems. The Lusca, therefore, evolves from a mere monster story into a cultural symbol for the last great unknowns on our own planet, reminding us that some of the most fantastic legends are born from the simple human act of looking into a dark hole in the ocean and wondering with a shiver what might be looking back. Now, let's turn our focus to a creature that has swum straight out of mythology and into the realm of confirmed biological fact, a living giant that for centuries was the hidden truth behind countless sea serpent reports, the giant oarfish. Known to science as Regalecus glesni, this animal is a genuine denizen of the deep that holds the title of the world's longest bony fish. Imagine a creature that can grow to lengths of 36 feet or more, a shimmering ribbon of silver and bronze that moves through the water not like a typical fish, but with an elegant vertical undulation. Its body is laterally compressed, meaning it's incredibly thin from side to side, giving it that signature ribbon-like appearance. The most striking feature, however, is its magnificent dorsal fin. This fin runs the entire length of its body, starting at the head with a cluster of long, ornate crimson-red rays that form a beautiful flowing crest, almost like a crown. The rest of the body is studded with iridescent spots and lacks true scales, covered instead in a silvery, guanine-coated skin that gives it an almost metallic sheen. This is not a monster built for powerful, predatory speed. It's a gentle giant of the mesopelagic zone, the mysterious region of the ocean between 600 and 3,200 feet deep, where sunlight fades into perpetual twilight. The oarfish's deep-sea habitat explains both its legendary status and why it remains so elusive. It is a creature perfectly adapted to a world of crushing pressure and near-total darkness. It spends most of its life suspended vertically in the water column, using its long pelvic fins which end in paddle-like tips, giving the oarfish its name for fine maneuvering. Its primary method of propulsion is that unique, sinuous movement of its entire dorsal fin, creating a wave that travels down its body. This allows it to hover and move with minimal energy expenditure, a crucial adaptation in a food-scarce environment. It feeds mainly on tiny zooplankton, small crustaceans like krill, and other small creatures, using a toothless mouth that it can protrude to create a suction force, drawing in its minute prey. The oarfish's incredible size is a classic example of deep-sea gigantism, a phenomenon where some species in the deep ocean grow much larger than their shallow water relatives, a trait that may offer advantages in reproduction, metabolism, or deterring predators in the vast, sparse darkness. For the vast majority of human history, this animal lived entirely out of sight and mind, a ghost in the deep. Its very existence was a secret of the abyss until the day one of these giants, sick, injured, or disoriented, would wash up on a shore, presenting a spectacle that defied all everyday understanding. It is on the beach where the oarfish truly cemented its legendary status. For centuries, the sudden appearance of a monstrous, serpentine carcass on a shoreline was a moment of both terror and fascination. These strandings were rare and dramatic events, often occurring after storms or seismic activity, which may have disturbed the delicate creatures from their deep water haunts. When a 30-foot-long, silvery serpent with a horse-like head and a flaming red mane washed ashore, what else could it be but the remains of a sea monster? Without any frame of reference, the descriptions that emerged from these events perfectly matched the classic sea serpent profile. Its long, slender body accounted for the humps seen at a distance, simply the peaks of its undulating form breaking the surface. Its striking red crest was interpreted as a mane, and its small, toothless mouth, when decomposed or viewed from a certain angle, could easily be described as reptilian or equine. The sheer length and the bizarre, ribbon-like shape were unlike any known fish. These carcasses were the ultimate proof for believers, tangible evidence that the stories sailors had told for generations were real. They were collected, sketched, and reported in newspapers as the definitive remains of the great sea serpent, their true identity obscured by their sheer strangeness and the lack of deep-sea biological knowledge. Modern science has since stepped in to beautifully debunk these myths, not by dismissing the witnesses, but by providing the thrilling explanation that the creature they found was real all along. It was just waiting to be properly classified. The giant oarfish is now recognized as the almost certain source of many historical sea serpent carcass reports. When we compare the descriptions from old newspapers and sailor logs to the known anatomy of the oarfish, the match is uncanny. The mane is the dorsal fin rays, the silvery scales are the guanine coating, the vertical undulation is its natural method of swimming. Even the behavior fits. When an oarfish is near the surface, it often holds its head and the front part of its body upright out of the water, a posture that would make any sailor's blood run cold. The debunking here is not a letdown, it's a profound validation of human observation. Our ancestors weren't hallucinating, they were accurately describing a real, breathtaking animal. They just didn't have the scientific context to give it its proper name. The myth of the sea serpent was, in a very real sense, a placeholder for a biological discovery that was centuries in the making. The giant oarfish stands as a magnificent bridge between the age of legend and the age of science, a living testament to the idea that the ocean's most fantastic stories are often just its truths, waiting to be understood. And so, after navigating this vast ocean of 50 historical mentions, from the primordial body of Tiamat to the shimmering ribbon of the giant oarfish, what are we left with? This journey reveals something far more profound than a simple collection of spooky stories. It uncovers a deep and enduring pattern in the human psyche, a fundamental drive to map the unknown, whether that map is drawn on vellum, woven into myth, or etched into the stars. For millennia, the sea has been our final frontier, a place of both tangible danger and limitless possibility. In the face of that immense, mysterious blue, our ancestors did what humans do best: they told stories. These legends of giant sea creatures were never just about fear, though fear was a powerful ingredient. They were a complex blend of awe, curiosity, and a primal need to impose narrative order on a chaotic and often indifferent natural world. A sudden storm that swallowed a ship, the inexplicable destruction of a net, the sight of a whale's spine arcing in a way that defied easy recognition. These events demanded an explanation. Giving that mystery a name and a form, whether it was the vengeful Yumabazu or the cosmic Yermungandr, was a way to reclaim a small measure of control. It transformed a random, senseless tragedy into a story with a villain, a plot, and sometimes a hero. These monsters were the original theories of everything for the maritime world, providing a framework to understand the forces that governed their lives and their livelihoods. This tapestry of tales also serves as a stunning record of cross-cultural conversation. It's remarkable how similar these creatures appear across civilizations that had no contact with one another. The long-necked humped serpent is a global archetype, appearing in the cold fjords of Norway, the warm waters of Gloucester Harbour, and the deep lakes of Patagonia. This consistency isn't proof of a single, undiscovered animal roaming the world's waterways, but rather evidence of a shared human experience. We all look upon a large, dark body of water with the same sense of wonder and trepidation. We all project our deepest fears and our greatest curiosities onto that blank canvas. What's more, as we saw with Hans Egede in Greenland or the settlers encountering the bunyip in Australia, when different cultures met at the water's edge, their monster stories didn't clash, they merged and reinforced one another. The local lore of the Inuit Tizharuk gave shape to the European missionaries' biblical Leviathan, creating a hybrid legend more powerful than either one alone. These creatures were cultural ambassadors of the deep, carrying the fears and beliefs of one people to another, proving that the language of mystery is universal. In our modern era, with satellites charting every inch of the ocean's surface and submersibles probing the deepest trenches, you might think the age of the sea monster would be over. But the legend has simply evolved, adapting to the new frontiers of our understanding. The thrilling revelation of the last century is that many of these legends were, in a sense, true. The Kraken was real, we just call it the colossal squid. The sea serpent was real, it was the magnificent giant oarfish. Our ancestors weren't lying, they were accurately reporting what they saw with the vocabulary and scientific context they had available. Their maps that warned, "Here be monsters," were not wrong, they were prophetic. We now know the monsters are indeed there, not as demons or dragons, but as breathtaking examples of biological reality. Creatures whose existence is every bit as fantastic as the stories told about them. This doesn't diminish the legends, it enriches them, transforming them from fictions into a kind of pre-scientific folklore, a centuries-long game of telephone where the message was ultimately confirmed. The deep sea is a realm of giants. And the mystery is far from solved. For every oarfish we identify, there is a new, bizarre creature discovered in the lightless deep, like the recently documented giant phantom jellyfish with its 30-foot-long, ribbon-like arms. The quest has simply shifted from chasing myths to documenting miracles, but the sense of wonder remains identical. So, what is the ultimate lesson carried on the current of these 50 stories? It is that the human spirit is, and always has been, defined by exploration. The same drive that sent the Vikings across the Atlantic in longships now sends robotic probes to the hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We are compelled to look into the dark, whether it's the dark of space or the dark of the abyssal plain, and imagine what might be looking back. These sea monster legends are the cultural fossils of that exploratory impulse. They are a reminder that curiosity and fear are two sides of the same coin, and that the desire to explain our world is one of our most noble and defining traits. The ocean, for all our technology, remains 95% unexplored. Its depths hold secrets we have not yet begun to imagine. The next great sea monster may not be a serpent or a squid, but something so alien and unexpected that it will rewrite our textbooks and spark a whole new cycle of legend and discovery. The map is no longer blank, but it is filled with question marks, and that is the most exciting place to be. Now we turn the tide over to you. The ocean of lore is vast, and every culture has its own waves of mystery. What are the sea monster tales from your part of the world? Did your grandparents tell you stories of a creature in a local lake or a strange sighting off the coast? Or do you have a personal theory about what might still be lurking in the unexplored darkness? The conversation has been going on for thousands of years, and your voice is the next chapter. Share your favorite legends, your wildest theories, and your own encounters with the unknown in the comments below. Let's keep this great, ancient story